Recycling has become Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, we will have a prayer by Councilwoman Ward, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, as we gather here this evening, may we be mindful of the welfare and safety of all of our citizens. As public servants, guide us to be responsible stewards of our community by opening our minds and hearts to our differences and realize that these differences can make us stronger. We ask that you protect our military and first responders as they serve and protect us. We thank them for their dedication and sacrifice to our city and country. Guide us to act with character, transparency, and wisdom, to listen with understanding and goodwill, and to use our resources wisely in order to represent all of our citizens fairly. And please note that we could use a little rain. In your name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Monday, July 16th, 2018 City Council meeting. I will now call this meeting to order. Mrs. Donaldson, roll call, please.
Fitzwater.
Present.
Graham.
Present.
Hensley.
Here.
Hussey.
Here.
Kimna.
Here.
Mahalovich.
Present.
Prather.
Here.
Schreiber.
Present.
Ward.
Here.
Wiseman.
Present.
Item 3, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Before we begin, I would like to recognize any scouts that are with us this evening. I think there were some over here. Welcome. Would you all like to come to the podium and give us your name and what school you're from, or maybe what badge you're working on? We're glad to have you all here tonight. You can come up here and just talk right into the mic if you'd like to give us your names. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Evan Hawksworth. I go to Troop 11. I'm 12. I'm going into 7th grade in Thomas Jefferson Middle School.
Great. Welcome. We're glad to have all of you here. Welcome.
I'm Gideon Duran. I go to Troop 11. I'm going into 6th grade at what is it called? Lewis and Clark. Yeah, thank you, Zeke. Lewis and Clark Middle School.
Great. Welcome.
I'm Zeke Duran. I'm in Troop 11. I'm going into the 7th grade, and I go to Lewis and Clark.
Great. Welcome.
I'm Thomas Harlan from Troop 11. I'm a second class scout working towards my Eagle, and I'm attending this meeting today as one of my requirements for the Citizenship in the Community Merit Badge.
Great.
Hi, I'm Truman Bono. I'm going to be 14, or I am 14, and I will be a freshman at Elias.
Wonderful. Well, we're glad to have all of you here. Thank you for coming, and we hope you learn a lot at our council meeting, and to your troop leader back there as well. So glad to have you here tonight. Item 4, miscellaneous agenda items, where we'll start with the Jefferson City Chamber of Commerce celebrating their 125th anniversary. So we'll invite Mr. Randy Allen, and we have some other chamber board leadership here as well. If they would like to come forward. So welcome. We're glad to have you all here. And if you want to talk about your upcoming 25th, then I have a special proclamation here as well.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and thank you so much for the proclamation. I have Bill Plank here, who's our current chairman of the board, and I have Cindy Schneiders from Central Bank and Amber Hall from DeLong's. They're the chairs of the Q125th yearly celebration that we've been putting on and will continue to do so. So I wanted to have them up here, and if they wanted to say a few words, particularly Bill, if he wanted to say something. He's never short of words.
welcome.
Thank you for honoring all the 125 years of the Chamber. As you guys know, the Chamber's been an integral part of this community for a long, long time. I love Jefferson City and the entire Jefferson City area. Of course, as you know, we work with our businesses. We have almost 2,000 members of our Chamber currently, and we are also the economic development partner for the city and the county, and love doing all that work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one more thing. There's other folks in the back I want to recognize. Would you stand up, Janet? I see Janet Weckenberg, Rodney Bax, Janet Ware-Enlow are here also to help us celebrate.
Wonderful.
Oh,
well,
I'm
if you
sorry.
all.
Where's Angie? Oh, and Angie Bauer is here from
Well,
Chamber
you all can come
staff.
forward as well, Rodney and Janet, and here in just a moment we'll have you all come forward for a picture. I do have this special proclamation that I'd like to read part of to recognize the Chamber. And some people may not know that it was originally called the Commercial Club, formed in 1893 by a group of prominent business leaders with the purpose of building a bridge across the Missouri River to open up and expand Jefferson City commerce. When you think about that, can you imagine 125 years ago that the whole purpose was building a bridge, and how daunting that must have been, and how they did that, the first original bridge across Bolivar Street 125 years ago, and how that completely changed the whole dynamic of Jefferson City and our community, building that bridge. And thanks to the Chamber, I don't know if people quite realize how much gratitude we have for that project in the past and where you've taken us in the future. So you mentioned about the other things you've touched on here, but I do want to say that the Chamber now proudly celebrates its 125th year anniversary of being a strong, visionary organization working for the betterment of the city of Jefferson and the county of Cole, and pledges to continue its mission for generations to come. Therefore, I, Carrie Turgeon, Mayor of the City of Jefferson, do hereby proclaim and sincere appreciation and congratulate the Jefferson City Chamber of Commerce for 125 years of dedicated service to the Jefferson City community. So here's to the first 125 years, and we're looking forward to what you're going to do in the next 125 years. There's also a celebration this week. Is it Thursday evening at the Mill Bottom?
Yes, 4 to 5:30.
4 to 5:30 this evening, so people can come and celebrate the 125th. I'm also going to put in a plug. There is a print. There's a limited edition print painted by the mayor, yours truly. Thank you. And all the proceeds go right back into the Chamber to celebrate this 125th year. So there's only 125 made. They're only $125, so you get the theme here. They're also selling special coins for those of you in the community that are coin collectors. What are those, 10 or 15 or 20? $10 for a coin, so that's a special keepsake, and those are also limited.
We ordered 125 and we have very few left. So
Very few left.
and get what you can. while
So
they're
don't
there.
miss that opportunity to celebrate the 125th, but thank you for what you're doing. And one more thing, when you think about this bridge, imagine the bridge we're working on now to get the bridge from the Capitol to our riverfront, and that's our next bridge project. So I'm looking forward to someday celebrating that as well with you. So any questions or comments of council? Well, then let's celebrate. If y'all want to come forward, we'll get a picture with your proclamation. Does council want to come up here?
I wait for a Mahalovich's move usually. I'm bleeding.
No one else stood up, so here I am. All right, simmer down in the back. Jeez.
All the bleeding.
Good quit. 3 or 4 of the time.
Item B next is the Cultural Arts Foundation. They're presenting a Capitol Avenue print to the mayor and City Hall. So I'd like to welcome our Cultural Arts Foundation here this evening. Welcome.
Hello. thank you first for allowing us to take a minute to introduce a new project that we have. It's called Portals of History. It will be an online technology-based walking app tour of the city that will bring alive, animate all of our cool history, and we're hoping that in another way we've introduced it through our Capitol Avenue box art project that Marianne Hall, artist and local historian, she did the artwork on Capitol Avenue for those electrical boxes. Very excited about that, and from that we would like to present to you
So we have number 1 out of 100 for the Portals of History on Capitol Avenue, so all the doors on Capitol Avenue. We'd like to present it to Mayor Turgeon to hang in City Hall. Again, there'll be 99 more of these released, and this is by Marianne Hall, both numbered and signed.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. Yes, well, let's all come up here and we'll do a photograph. And thank you for this. And this is quite an honor. We will definitely display this at City Hall. Thank you. And having the artist here is an honor. And if you've seen these wonderful doors of Capitol Avenue, the Portals of History, they certainly are. And it's amazing the project that you're doing, thanks to the Cultural Arts Foundation on Capitol Avenue. So I'll come on around. Does council want to come on up again? Because this is the city's Arts Commission. Let's get
He's just not waiting for you. I'm present. Here.
Everybody's going to say present before the end of the year.
I don't think so. Can you see Rick? Can you see that? All right. Okay. One more. It's yours now. All right. That's what it's supposed to be.
Thank you all very much. Thank you all. All right, before you all walk out, too, I have a couple things to say about this really quickly here. I know we took the picture, but this is beautiful and stunning. If people want to buy a print, do they just contact the city or the Cultural Arts Foundation? Who's your contact? So the Cultural Arts Foundation's Facebook page, you said they're $100, and so they can have their own. So we appreciate getting number 1 to hang in City Hall. It's quite an honor so that the community can enjoy it. And I think I'm going to return the favor. I'm going to buy number 2, and I think that I should present one maybe to our first family, to the governor and his wife. They live on Capitol Avenue, our newest residences. And I think that I would challenge others that they may want to purchase one and carry it forward, because this is a great piece of our history. So maybe other council members or others in our community that want to celebrate history might think of somebody they could carry this forward to as well. And it's limited edition. There won't be very many. So I hope that you sell out and then work on the next batch of doors and portals to the future. So, all right. Thank you all very much. Thank you. That is very cool. Item C, now we get to recognize Fred Rodeman, who is retiring with 41 plus years of service with Parks and Recreation. We'll welcome Mr. J.J. Gates.
I'm joining you, Fred.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to be here this evening to honor Fred Rodeman on his retirement from the Department of Parks and Recreation and Forestry after 41 years and 5 months. The official date will be August 2nd. Fred began full-time employment March 17th of 1977 as a maintenance employee responsible for brush hog mowing throughout the park system. A couple years later, he became the Washington Park caretaker. And at that time, a lot of the maintenance was done by folks who lived in the parks. So Fred lived in the park, and in spring, summer months, he did a lot of the ball field preps and for league and tournament play. And then in the fall, he lined out the Parks and Recreation football fields and also the high school fields. At that time, Elias and JC relied on park staff to do that. And in the winter months, then he tackled all the ice arena maintenance operations, which kept him real busy. 1984, his title changed to Maintenance 1, and his job responsibilities broadened to construction projects and equipment operation, tackling park and facility improvement projects. Fred was promoted to Maintenance 2 later in 1984, and then to his current title of crew leader in 1994. Much of his career, Fred remained on the construction improvement crew until 2006, and then at that point he moved over and helped with park and facility maintenance, recreation program support, and community-wide special events. Fred's positive attitude, strong work ethic, dependability, and work performance have made him a valuable part of Parks and Recreation and the Jefferson City community. In addition, he received the Outstanding Service Award in 2000 for the entire city. When asked, Fred could not pick one project he was most proud of. He has enjoyed his involvement with all past projects and special events. He gets the most enjoyment when the park users and public are happy, enjoying themselves at the park, at a recreation program or a special event. When not working, Fred enjoys spending time with his kids and grandchildren. He also enjoys rehabbing and repairing older homes, which he'll have more time to do now. So, big congratulations and a big thank you to Fred for all he's accomplished over the last 41 plus years. So,
Fred, thank you and congratulations for your many years of service. And I always enjoy seeing you out working. You always have a smile on your face. You're always so happy to be there, and we appreciate all that you've done. So on behalf of the city, I would like to present to you a special key to the city for all your years of service. Awesome. So, and do you have anyone in the audience you'd like to recognize or anything you'd like to say?
All my youngest sisters right there, Claire. And my oldest sister is back here in the back.
Great.
And their husbands. And we've got an awesome system in the parks. Can't beat it. I mean, and Thursday Night Live brings in a big crowd. And so, like I say, we've got people really enjoy the parks. So.
Well, thank you. A lot of that's due to your hard work and people like you that give it a lot of special effort. So thank you very much. Well, we'll come forward and council, and we'll have a photograph with the key. Council come on.
You can post it on your Facebook.
I had to get in my spot. You know, if we could get that like back window to be a little bit more mirrory.
All right, got it.
You know, he doesn't like that side.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, congratulations, and we're glad to have your family here visiting as well. We also have a recognition for Diane Carey, who is retiring with 24 years of service with Planning and Protective Services.
Larry, come on up here. David, come on up here too. You stand behind, that's fine. Ann? I'm asking three of my division directors to stand up here with me too, because Diane supports all of them in addition to the rest of the department, so I thought I would let them share the joy of doing this. Diane Carey began her employment on February 16th, 1994 as a receptionist for the Department of Planning and Code Enforcement. After 24 years of service, her friendly and cordial attitude is what is conveyed to other city staff and the public as they interact with her at City Hall. Actually, I've never seen you once not smiling or happy, so that's pretty amazing. Her tenure with the city has allowed her to become very knowledgeable and skilled in many different areas of city services. Diane is helpful and responsive to customer needs, whether it is a city employee that needs assistance, a customer that's coming in that needs help with contractor licenses or permits or anything like that. She regularly fields calls and public walk-ins and acts as a backup to the front desk, which is a very important position. That's very hard to work at sometimes, I know. She also handles all the cash receipts generated by Public Works and Planning and Protective Services, and is primary support for the Building Regulations Division. So perhaps I should have had Matt come up here too, since she supports your department in a very important role also. Diane takes on additional duties when other administrative staff are out of the office. This includes, but not limited to, checking payroll on payroll Fridays, which is very important to everybody, copying meeting packets, calling members of committees and commissions to be sure that they're going to be attending so that we have a quorum, and occasionally attending meetings for minute taking. With Diane's help and assistance, work flows quickly, accurately, and seamlessly. And we will be, you're really a valued asset that we're going to miss you when you're in retirement. So, thank you very much.
Diane, thank you for your many years of service. I really always enjoy seeing you here, and like you said, you always have a smile on your face, are always so happy to do such a great job, and we will greatly miss you. Is there anything you'd like to share, or anyone here you'd want to introduce? You're welcome to have a few words.
I do have my husband here, Bill. I've just really enjoyed working here at the city. I have great coworkers, great bosses, great people in different departments that we work with, and we've had many people come and go and promote to different departments, but I've always stayed in building regulations because I loved that job, working with the inspectors and then working with the community when you're taking in permitting and licensing. So it's been a pleasure. It's been tough sometimes, but it really, I've stuck through here because of my coworkers and bosses. They've been great. And
We've been
thank you,
very
City.
lucky to have you, and the customer service has been so excellent. So thank you for all your many years and hard work, and good luck, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
And we have a special plaque we'd like to present to you, so come on forward and we'll get another picture, and council too.
All right, don't look at Alex, look at me.
This is just wonderful to have so many great things to celebrate at a council meeting. The next item, we're recognizing the July Outstanding Employee Service Award recipient, Mr. Brad Weiser. So Steve Kroll and Matt Marash will give us this presentation.
I will. Continuing on with the theme of recognizing outstanding employees, I will ask Mr. Brad Weiser to come forward and the director of his department, Mr. Matt Marash. So congratulations to Brad Weiser, City of Jefferson Senior Street Maintenance Worker, Public Works Department, for receiving the City of Jefferson Outstanding Employee Service Award for July 2018. This recognition is not only for the examples that I'll be mentioning in a few minutes that were referenced in this nomination form, but also in recognition of all the service Brad provides to the city and to the citizens of Jefferson City. Some of the information, paraphrase from Mr. Weiser's information nomination, include the following. Mr. Weiser accomplishes assigned duties in an exceptional manner, doing so while working independently. Mr. Weiser always goes out of his way to provide outstanding customer service, including working with other city departments. Brad is always willing to give you a hand with whatever comes up. Mr. Weiser has numerous skills and abilities to accomplish various jobs within the city. Mr. Weiser fosters excellent working relationships with coworkers using a friendly personality. Brad is always a can-do individual, always willing to help out in any way he can and exceeds the expectations in doing so. And Mr. Weiser's significant contributions to the overall quality of life in the city are recognized and appreciated. So congratulations and thanks to Mr. Brad Weiser, City of Jefferson, Senior Street Maintenance Worker, Public Works Department, for receiving the City of Jefferson Outstanding Employee Service Award for July 2018. Got some family members here?
My wife, Julie.
Stand up and say hi. Hi. Thank you for being here. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. We're very happy to recognize you with this honor and appreciate your exceptional service to the city. So thank you for the great work and appreciate it on behalf of the City of Jefferson and the City Council. We'd like to present with you some gift certificates and a city coin. So if you'd like to come forward, we'll get a picture, and council too.
I might as well. I'm in the middle. How do I get stuck in the middle?
A good place to be.
I mean, sure.
Yeah. All right, 1, 2, 3. All right, one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Is this where Bob was before I was here?
No, he was in the back.
Oh, okay.
He was tall. We made him stay in the back. You got but
All right, item F, we have with us this evening representatives from Republic Services to tell us about making recycling simple, the Empty, Clean, Dry initiative. So Mrs. Jamie Abbott will lead us here. And welcome, glad to have you here tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight we have Monty Kriebel and Lillian Kennard with us from Republic Services to talk about a new education campaign that we'll be doing, or actually collaborating with Republic Services for the public. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it on over.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. We want to talk specifically tonight about recycling and the state of recycling. Our current model is broken, and this is a situation that's not unique to the city of Jefferson. It's a nationwide problem that's going on, and there's several reasons why the model's become broken, but there's three that really stand out forefront that has created this situation. And the first, I'm sure you're all aware of, is the global trade battles that's going on and how it's affected commodity pricing. And the second one, which is the one that finally broke the model, is the recent actions of China. China is the world's largest importer of recyclables. They import 40% of the world's recyclables. And as of January 1st, they put an embargo on 24 items, and the recyclables that they do accept cannot have more than a 3% contamination rate. So that virtually has shut down recyclables from the United States going into China. We, Republic Services, have not shipped any containers to China since January 1st. So it's basically put a hold on where the recyclables are going. We're currently looking at different markets to get rid of recyclables and different ways to clean it up, because contamination is a big problem. And that's the third issue, is contamination. It's been estimated that the recyclables that we collect in Jefferson City has a 20 to 25% contamination rate. So we've been working with the Department of Planning and Protective Services on an educational campaign to clean up recycling. And there's really three easy steps to do that. And the first one is to sort smart. That's to know what can be recyclable and what cannot be. And if there's any question if it can be recyclable, it needs to go in the trash. The second one is clean, empty, clean, and dry. So if it's a recyclable item, we need to make sure it's empty, clean, and dry. And then the third is it cannot be bagged. We cannot bag any of our recyclables. So these three simple solutions will help clean up the recyclables. We've been talking with Jamie and her department on several ways of getting this message across. And I've got two short videos that I'd like to show you that might share more light on this. And then after these videos, we can open it up for any questions if you have any. So.
Thank you.
Recycling has become a way of life for Americans. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, more than 34% of garbage is recycled, an increase of 400% since 1960. But recycling as we know it is at a critical crossroads. For decades, the current recycling model worked for America, but that model is no longer sustainable or economically viable. Once a profit center for municipalities, recycling collection no longer generates significant revenue, and some municipalities even lose money on recycling. What's driving the downturn in recycling? To start, the economics of recycling have shifted. Lower oil prices have reduced demand for recyclable commodities, causing prices to plummet. Cheap crude makes it less expensive to produce new plastic than to sort and clean recycled plastic. Also, prices for other recyclable commodities, such as aluminum, copper, iron, and paper, have fallen sharply. Furthermore, the cost of recycling glass is actually higher than its commodity value. And since it has a high CO2 footprint to recycle, and doesn't emit any greenhouse gases, often glass can be landfilled with less environmental impact than recycling it. Lastly, the global manufacturing trend of lightweighting packaging by using lighter and less materials has caused the recycling ton to evolve. It takes 90% more plastic bottles to make a ton than it did 15 years ago, increasing collection and processing costs. Today, household recycling collections are contaminated with unrecyclable items that can't be processed. A recent survey found that 68.3 million Americans will place an item into a recycling container even if they aren't sure it's recyclable. What impact does this have? Unrecyclable materials increase sorting time, damage recycling equipment, and decrease the value of commodities. Collections are further contaminated by materials that haven't been properly cleaned before being recycled. However, the popularity of recycling continues to grow. An overwhelming 90% of U.S. residents say they want recycling and are willing to pay for it. Maintaining the momentum recycling has gained is more than a matter of economics. Recycling conserves natural resources, saves energy, and reduces pollution. It's simply the right thing to do. To meet public demand, municipalities and Republic Services must engineer a shift in the current recycling model that is mutually beneficial for everyone. Through collaboration, we can create solutions to make recycling sustainable for our communities. What can you do today? Sort smarter. Proactively educate your community. Learn what materials can and can't be recycled in your community before placing an item in your bin. Make sure all of their items are empty, clean, and dry before placing them into your recycling bins. And finally, encourage them to share recycling knowledge with others. Not everyone is aware of what can be recycled or how it's done. Together, we can change the way we recycle to ensure that recycling remains sustainable for a better world and a brighter future for our blue planet. Learn more at republicservices.com/recyclingreimagined. Recycling has
Okay, so really our message is to clean up recycling. And again, it's just by sorting smart and empty, clean, and dry, and then don't bag it. It needs to be loose. So we're going to be working with Jamie on some education material out to the public. So if you guys have any questions, I'd feel free to answer them at this time.
We appreciate you coming and giving us that educational piece. I know things like contamination, I don't think we realized, 25% is a pretty high number for our community, and that some people think since the item's recyclable, if they just put it in the bin, that it's fine. In fact, we spoke with someone at Environmental Quality Commission who said, oh, I didn't realize that. They have a ketchup bottle, you put it in, you don't think about maybe rinsing it. So You would think that we would, but maybe that's just not the mentality or the thinking. So we appreciate you bringing that to us. And the timing is also good because with the bins that we had in different places around the community, the drop-off bins going away recently, realizing that that's a nationwide trend and it's not just something that's a Jefferson City issue of not having those bins, and that kind of the reasons behind that, which you're able to explain. So people certainly can still take the recyclables to the drop-off facilities at New World or Federal International, or if they're inside the city limits, they have the single-stream bins. But the key is using that sort smarter thinking of empty, clean, and dry. So we appreciate that, and maybe thinking before they even get something, kind of pre-cycling necessarily, where if you get a sack as you're out shopping, do you really need that sack in the first place? Maybe bring a reusable bag so you're not even having to worry about that where it ends up. But kind of thinking through the item before you even buy it, and then where it ends up in the end, and the whole cycle of what that is to our city and to our environment, and seeing the measures that other cities and communities are taking, such as not having straws or not using bags or having bag fees or those kind of things. You mentioned not using bags. Did you mean plastic bags is what you meant?
They always, the Walmart bags, the grocery store bags, those are not recyclable.
Inside the bin.
Right.
Okay.
Well, they're not recyclable at all. So you don't need to put your recyclables in them and then put that in a bin. So no bags.
And some grocery stores collect those, have collection points, but maybe thinking twice before we even take those. And are there other questions of council members on this item? Well, keep us posted as the as new initiatives happen and what we can do, and maybe how our recycling rate hopefully is getting better. The contamination rate, we want that to go down. Certainly doesn't help anyone if we make the effort to recycle and then have a contaminated load. So appreciate you all being here tonight. And why don't I, yes,
Just
Jamie.
real quick, sorry, Monty. Here in the next few months, you're going to see from Planning and Protective Services, we'll be updating our website to include, these educational videos that we showed tonight, along with doing some more like Facebook or media outreach to get this recycling information out there to the public, and along with other educational materials. So you'll be seeing a lot more information coming out from us soon.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, let me get a picture of you all so I can at least post it and remind everybody, empty, clean, dry, right? Okay, smile. Okay, thank you very much, and we will do our part and challenge those in our wards to do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 5, we have a public hearing. And item A, creation of the School Street Local District. Mrs. Donaldson.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri establishing a local historic district to be named the School Street Local Historic District and adoption of associated building design requirements.
All right, Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This bill would establish a local historic district for the School Street area and adopt building design guidelines for the area. Chapter 8 of the City Code authorizes the creation of local historic districts. There are basically 2 criteria that an application would have to meet. The first is the signatory support of at least 75% of the property owners within a proposed district. The second is that there are certain findings outlined within the City Code that must be met. The primary purpose of creation of a local historic district is to support the adoption of design regulations for structures contained within the district. So up on the screen is a map of the proposed district. It is located generally south and southwest of the intersection of East McCarty Street and Lafayette Street. Consists of 28 properties and about 4 acres. And so the application for the local historic district is a property owner initiated application. 22 of the 28 property owners within the area signed the application, so it meets the 75% criteria. And then the application consists of basically 2 parts. First is a historical narrative outlining the history of the area, and the second is the set of proposed design guidelines. And so the effective historic designation, so if the bill is passed, the bill and the local historic district is formed, the Historic Preservation Commission would become responsible for the review and approval of any new buildings or building additions or modifications to the exterior appearance of buildings located within the district. They essentially function as a design review board, using the design guidelines as a guide when reviewing applications for construction within the district. And so a property owner would have to get a positive outcome before the Historic Preservation Commission before proceeding with any kind of building or building modifications relating to the exterior of buildings. And so the area is located within floodplain area. Up on the screen is a map of the area in relation to the regulated floodplain. The regulated floodplain is the area shown in blue. And so the majority of the properties within the district are located within the regulated floodplain, and one of the underlying purposes of the application is to achieve relief from certain floodplain regulatory issues, namely the substantial improvement rule, which is a federal floodplain regulation, which limits the amount of improvements to a structure that is located within a floodplain to 50% of the structure's value. And there have been a number of public meetings that have been held on this prior to coming in front of the City Council. The first is a neighborhood meeting scheduled by staff and held basically inviting all of the property owners that own property within the district to make sure they understand the various the details of the application and its effect. The second was a public hearing in front of the Historic Preservation Commission. And then the third was a public hearing in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The dates as shown up on the screen. Staff did have a negative recommendation on this application before both the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission. The staff concerns that the Historic Preservation Commission were primarily targeted toward the required findings for a historic district. These concerns are listed in the staff analysis section of the staff report to the Historic Preservation Commission, which is contained on page 7 of your council packets. Staff concerns at the Planning and Zoning Commission, where that there are better tools available for preservation of architecturally significant areas, namely that the historic district is a very strong tool, and that a more appropriate tool for the area might be the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District, such as was recently used for the Capitol Avenue area. Also, staff had concerns that there are uncertainties associated with the effect of historic designation on the floodplain regulations. Again, these items are listed in the staff analysis section of the staff report to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is contained on page 16 of your council packets. With respect to floodplain regulations, staff have attempted to get answers to questions regarding the effect of historic designation at the local level on federal floodplain regulations. And we've been unable to get a clear indication that historic designation would result in relief from floodplain regulations. There was some correspondence that was traded between the city and the State Historic Preservation Office, which is contained in your packet, and a handout that was distributed to you this evening. The Historic Preservation Commission voted 4-2 to recommend approval of formation of the local historic district, and also a 6-0 vote for approval of the design guidelines. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted 5-3 to forward a neutral recommendation on the application to the City Council. So they forwarded a neutral recommendation. There was a large amount of public comment received on this application, some of which has been submitted as written comments and some as verbal comments presented at the public hearings, both the Historic Preservation and Planning and Zoning Commissions. The written correspondence on the application received up until June 14th is contained within your electronic council packets. It starts on page 93 of that document. And then the correspondence received after that date was distributed as a separate handout to you this evening. And also a synopsis of the comments received at the 2 public hearings is contained in the meeting minutes, both of which are contained within your packet. The Historic Preservation Commission's meeting minutes start on page 1, and the Planning and Zoning Commission starts on page 8. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions of the council prior to opening the public hearing.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Barron? Okay. So seeing none, we will open the public hearing, and the procedure for that is we will have the applicant will speak first, and the applicant can be one person, or there could be multiple people who are the applicant. And then after that, followed by a spokesperson for the opposition. In each of those 2 parties would have a 10-minute time frame. And then next we would have alternating between support and opposition, and each one has 5 minutes. And then at the end, the applicant gets an additional 5 minutes if needed for any closing comments, and then we would close the hearing. And each person would speak once. If they would want to speak twice, the only way to get that is through council approval. So, and then after the hearing is closed, there won't be any additional testimony, but we would then proceed with council deliberation. And you did not have to sign up in advance to speak, so this is open to anybody who would like to. So with that, I will open the public hearing portion, and we'll invite the applicant, which would be Mrs. Smith, forward. Welcome.
Good evening to everyone. And again, I'll say, this has been a long process, and I want to thank the City Council for their attention to all the paperwork that's come before them and all they've had to read and to learn to become acquainted with this issue, of which there's a lot of moving parts. I also want to thank the city staff for all the work they've put into this application too. I know there's been considerable time that's been spent on this, as well as on our part. We've spent a great deal of time on it too. We're here tonight to ask that you approve our application for this local historic district. This application hasn't been approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. There's been a lot of side issues that have clouded this topic, and we feel like primarily your duty tonight is to look at our application and decide, have we met the criteria according to the ordinance as it has written? Do we meet that criteria? That is your question to address tonight, and all these side issues are just side issues. We submitted this application to protect our properties. There was a threat to our neighborhood, as you're well aware, and we're responding to that threat and trying to save our neighborhood and to preserve the history that is associated with it, with that neighborhood. The architecture and that history go together. These buildings are a tangible link to that historic past. This is the foot area, and this one little area on Lafayette and East McCarty are all that remain of that historic black neighborhood that once thrived there. We have started this in this small block. It's a small area because this is a very onerous process to write these applications, and this was the most threatened part of this neighborhood. But I want to stress, we consider this a starting point. We think that this whole area, it should encompass a bigger area. It should encompass over to Roland Street, and it may be as far east as Chestnut or Clark. I'm not sure just what the boundaries of the old neighborhood were. But similar to Old Munichburg, that's a district that celebrates and the cultural German heritage of that area. And just like that district, I think this area is just as historic and should be recognized. Now, that goes beyond the scope of this application. I want everybody to understand that we feel like that's important and we should continue with that bigger project. one of the side issues is the floodplain. Now, I will say, the floodplain was the impetus for this effort because that's what threatened our neighborhood. And I have talked to Todd Tucker with the FEMA 7th District in Kansas City, and he explained to me that on a case-by-case basis, members of the Historic District can apply to their local floodplain administrator for waivers for improvements that they want to make to their properties. And you may recall from an article in the News Tribune last week that a couple of residents over in Cedar City did this very thing, that wanted to stay after the '93 flood. Many of those houses were taken down and they were bought out. But that could happen. That could happen this year on a case-by-case basis. People can request waivers, and that's handled by our own local Public Works Department. At the heart of this issue is a property rights issue. We have met the 75% approval of our property owners. We pay our taxes and higher flood insurance premiums. If there was a flood tomorrow, there would be no bailouts for us. That money is gone. We're on our own. So we're not asking for city's help. We're not a burden on the city. You can be sure, though, that if the city proceeds with a plan to create a green space in our neighborhood, there would be a great deal of additional cost acquiring those buildings and tearing them down. And you might say, oh, well, that's just federal money, but I mean, that's taxpayers. We're all taxpayers. And that money could be used for something more important than taking away this neighborhood. Of course, then you've lost property taxes for all the years thereafter because those buildings are gone. We're trying to save our buildings, and we're trying to revitalize this area by an effort to get waivers for revitalization. The city did create the mechanism for these local historic districts to help revitalize communities, and that is our purpose here. Finally, we acknowledge and respect the history of Quinn Chapel. This church is within our district, is not within our district boundaries for several reasons. And I'd like to address that because that is one of the side issues. The reasons are this: their building is new, and we were not aware of their wish to be part of this district until May this year, well after our application was in. They are not in the floodplain and therefore do not have as much to gain as those of us who are. And lastly, they would be encumbered by design guidelines that would be in place with a historic district. Again, we want very much to work with Quinn Chapel and all of the community in the foot to see further recognition of the history of this area. And we feel like this is just a big first step. We have a common purpose with Quinn Chapel. We both want revitalization of this neighborhood, and we both want preservation of the history of this neighborhood. With that, I would just ask that you respect the wishes of the neighbors who have signed this petition and approve our application for this historic district.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Does council have any questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you. All right, and next, is there anyone who would like to speak on behalf of the opposition? Welcome, Reverend Gould.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I sent a letter to the mayor as well as to the Ward 1 council people, and I've appeared before you. I will say that the one thing that I do agree with Mrs. Smith and the applicants is that this community is extremely important. Most of you all know that, well, literally for the last 12 years ago, MoDOT started having conversations with my church about yet another move. The first conversation was in 1950. The church was moved in 1952, and on June 30th, we celebrated 5 years in the new building. On yesterday, we actually celebrated 168 years. Amen. Continuous years of being in this community. Our church was started by those who found themselves in 1850 still enslaved, 13 years before the Emancipation Proclamation, 15 years before those who found themselves enslaved in this state and in this city would be allowed to go free. And they still had the perseverance and the tenacity to actually build a church, to build a log cabin, to purchase land, and to then donate that to what is now Quinn Chapel. It is interesting that Mrs. Smith indicates that this is a side issue. I really take exception to that, being the oldest black entity in the city. And it is inaccurate that she was not aware of our interest in being in this. The mayor has sat down with Mrs. Smith, with Jane Beadham and myself and other community members in my church. Last year, approximately a year ago on July the 11th, we met with Mrs. Smith and talked about the area and the opportunity for economic development. I think that her today's honesty, in our last meeting, there were a lot of additional facts that didn't quite bear out, but she did indicate that they want to protect their property. I am a property owner, and I do understand that as well, but I don't like the idea of this guise of protecting black history, and you don't get to do black history in the city of Jefferson without including Quinn Chapel and frankly Lincoln University as well. But to have a historic district that conveniently carves out our church. I have an email from Jenny that was dated July 15 of 2017 after meeting with me, and she indicated in somewhat of an insulting way, and I'll forward it to the mayor and all of the council people when I go back to my seat. She indicated that it was a shame that more black people didn't live in this area, and she doesn't know why black people didn't decide to do this. And so it's reminiscent for me of the era of Jim Crow and segregation, and even the 1962 urban renewal project that actually dismantled all of the wealth and the commerce that was in our community. It's reminiscent of a time when people with privilege had the authority to actually draw lines and decide who was in and who was out. And that has hurt people in our community, and the impact is still felt in our families. And so I will spend the rest of my minutes on Rod Chapel from the local and the statewide NAACP. Had a representative here last week. This is the week of the national meeting. He wants to share this note, and I will also forward this. The NAACP is deeply troubled that Quinn Chapel, the oldest African American church and entity in Jefferson City, has been left out of this very important community question. It seems hard to consider the effects of gentrification without incorporating everyone in the community. To leave out Quinn Chapel from consideration and inclusion in this determination is not the inclusive community we've strived so long to keep and promote. On behalf of the NAACP, we would ask reconsideration on this point and a meeting as quickly as possible following the return from the National Convention. And at this point, we are asking that the City Council either vote no or delay the actual project because of the lack of inclusion and the many questions that are garnered by this application. I also have a note from the Ross family, and the nephew of Dr. Ross actually signed the petition, but he also indicated that he also had no idea that Quinn Chapel was not included in it, and his family is dedicated still to Quinn Chapel because it was important to Dr. Ross. And any other way that they may be available to us and to redoing this, they would also like to do that. And now we will read my letter. On yesterday, as I said, we celebrated our 168th anniversary. Mrs. Beadham and Mrs. Smith have cited several accomplished African American professors as a part of their rationale for creating this district, some of whom were members at Quinn. We've attempted for months to come to an amicable agreement with them. I've met with them and the mayor prior to the initial vote on the application, and they refused to consider modifying the application. Last month, as I said, community members, NAACP, and et cetera, testified in front of planning and zoning, and they actually decided to do a neutral vote, as you are aware of. We certainly believe that the history of African Americans in this city, much like in the nation, has been undervalued and ignored. So we believe it should be recognized, but to recognize it in the city and leave out the church that was formerly known as the Church at the Foot, the church that in the 1860s housed classes for the then Lincoln Institute, would be to create another sense of racial division. When we faced our second move, because of MoDOT, we were intentional about staying in the area and staying in this historical corridor. We hope that by building the new edifice on Lafayette, we would provide tangible evidence that this community was worth an investment and honor the legacy of the African American citizens who called this area home, but also attract businesses to help provide services and economic development for the residents. The rest of it I think I'd already said, so it would be redundant. I also have a note from Carolyn Johnson. Carolyn Johnson, the owner of Johnson's Barber and Beauty, in essence is the only business that is left of the more than 28 businesses that were on Lafayette. And she feels that to leave us out of this would also set precedent that would also keep her business from possibly being historical, because they too are in a new building. She's in Texas and is not able to join us, but I stand here, I have parishioners here, some of whom have lived long enough to be in all three of our buildings, and you'll hear testimony from them later. Again, I'm not opposed to historic preservation. If you know me, you know that I'm an advocate of all things black, and I'm certainly an advocate of teaching our history and preserving our history, but I'm not an advocate of being left out, and I would be remiss if I allowed that to go on without saying anything. Dr. King said our lives began the day that we become, our lives began to end the day we become silent about things that matter, and the time is always right to do what's right. And so I am praying tonight that the city council does what's right, and even if it means a delay so that there could be more consensus building in our community, because we certainly don't need anything that would divide us. I am asking that you do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Cassandra. Does council have any questions of the speaker at this time? Councilman Hussey?
I do. Thank you, Reverend Gould. Just for clarity's sake, you brought up inclusion of Quinn Chapel into this. If I look at the map that was drawn, and if that map outlines just extended east over Lafayette, included Quinn Chapel, and you were a signatory to this application, is that what you're seeing?
That would satisfy my parishioners. That would satisfy many of my parishioners are lifelong members of Jefferson City, Missouri. Okay. Their children have returned to this community, and I think that would satisfy the legacy of our church. Again, we don't have anything against historic preservation. We have something against being left out, and particularly in an application that touts the significance of African American history and the accomplishment of so many African Americans, many of whom are a part of our own history as well. That would absolutely do that. And that was my request when I met with Ms. Beadham and Ms. Smith when the mayor was present at my church.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted clarity on that specific piece, so thank you.
Councilwoman Ward.
Thank you, Reverend Gould. I think the intent of those who submitted the application was a misunderstanding as far as how they look at a historic district. I went through the same process and created a district over on West Main in 2002. And when looking to form a district, you look at the boundaries based on the architectural character of those structures and the historical architecture, but you also look at what happened inside the walls of that architecture. Your church is brand new. Not that it's not historic by any means, based upon
what has happened within the walls of your 3 structures.
Right.
But this particular structure is new, and I think it wasn't included because the guidelines that they drew up don't pertain to new in a historical standpoint. So I just wanted to, is my understanding based on my experience with how I did my district.
Yes.
You know, no front additions that would detract from the existing structure, no side additions that would, the same roof slopes, window sizes, door sizes, setback. Ours even went further and protected mature trees.
Yes, yes.
So, if it were to be postponed and you were in agreement to sign to be part of this district and follow those guidelines, what is the process in your church to do that? Is there a committee?
We have trustees, some of whom are present now. And so that would be the process. It's a pretty simple process. We don't have to wait 5 weeks for a council to meet or anything like that. And I certainly appreciate that, and that would have been my thought had there not been the subsequent meetings. And in Mrs. Smith's own words today, that's not actually what she said. She said she didn't know we wanted to be included. And so had there not been other background things going on, and I'll just be candid because that's the only thing I know how to do, I really think if 408 was never in play that we wouldn't even have this application and we wouldn't be here, honestly. And so I just think that there's a lot of things going on in the background that have not just been very forthcoming. But certainly, again, I do want to say for the record, we are opposed because we were left out, and the bulk of this application, while those things are highlighted, talks about Black history. And it talks, and again, and Black history is American history. It's worldwide history, but it is just odd that, you know, there are 2 white applicants that come and decide to tell us about our history and then decide like what part of that history gets to be highlighted and what part doesn't.
Well, and again, I really don't think that was the intent of these applicants. I don't know that they actually would know what they would find when they went to research this area. And
there are people in my church that they could have asked.
And the Black history happened inside the boundaries that they, you know, had.
And also on the ground where we are, because that's why we chose that ground, because of the historic nature. We could have moved anywhere in this area. We could have.
I just don't want
But that's why we chose that very area, so that we could continue to be a part of this historic area, so that we could have an impact on the lives of the people. And you know, gentrification in its purest definition is to basically take that which gave poor people access and make it inaccessible to them. And so that is our fear, and that's why we stay in this community, because it is that important to us. For us, this is not about buildings, this is about people's lives.
I mean, I commend you for your history, and I just don't want something that is trying to be positive for the area, for our old neighborhoods, for our city, you know, to be torn apart and make us divide. I think we can move forward and have a successful area
That
here.
is our hope as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Graham?
I guess I have a question for city staff. Do you guys have a copy of the map that you drew to come up with this historic district? Could you put that up on the screen? It was drawn up by the applicant. Do you have a copy of that?
The one drawn by the applicant, contained within the application.
I'd like to see how it was described.
No, the only map that we have, I think, available on the screen is the one drawn by...
Because I'm trying to see what homes were actually included in this historic district.
That map?
That right there, okay.
Yep.
Our parking lot starts at Handley Way. And we have parishioners that actually live in that, you know, actually own property there. So certainly, again, this is not about that, but it's just to do the right thing.
Are there further questions for Reverend Gould? Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, so now at this time we will have, we will alternate speakers. So we'll have a speaker in support, and then we will alternate then in opposition, and each speaker can have 5 minutes. And if each speaker would please just state their name when they come to the podium for the record. And then I'll implement the landwehr rule. Landwehr always said the landwehr rule was that we don't clap and we don't boo, so that we can just be fair on both sides. So I'll implement the landwehr rule as well, and welcome Patsy Galbraith. But for the record, we'll have all the speakers state their name for the record.
Hi,
Welcome, Patsy.
Good evening, Mayor, council persons, and everyone present. This whole situation is pretty disheartening to me, but I'm also hopeful within the boundaries of this room. The hopeful part is that I've worked along with the people. Well, first of all, I'm in support of creating this historical neighborhood. It's what's good for this area. I live in this area. I was born and raised here, and I know where the boundary starts of the flood area. That doesn't necessarily encompass the area that is going to be created, a historical neighborhood, which is on the other end. The area where the flood zone starts, the boundaries, starts at my cousin Sheila Logan's house, which is on my street, that area of Lafayette. So it encompasses a long area. The big picture here is that it affects people and their property and their homes. This needs to be approved because they need to be able to protect their property. The African American heritage needs to be able to be respected and preserved in this area. And working with all the people that we have worked with of all races, we have been successful in making a lot of positive things happen in that area. A lot of organizations, Parks and Recs, Jefferson City Cultural Arts, the Historical City of Jefferson, have already started to do a lot of positive things in that area. Making this a historical neighborhood is just another step in moving it forward. Another step that can move even forward into building on that. Quinn Chapel is not excluded from the history that we are telling throughout that whole area. Those things are what are pretty important. Right now, we're trying to, your task is to vote on to make this historical district. Doing that in this area highlights the good things about Jefferson City. When people come, they're educated. They're educated about German, through Munichburg. When they come in this area, they can be educated through Lincoln University, which we love, through this area about what happened in our town, the African American history in this area. And we want to be able to work together to do that. And so I just hope you support the homeowners and help them be able to fix up their property, save it, and not be a green space, and let them build it up and make it better. And let's stick to that and work along with Quinn Chapel, do whatever we can to help them feel better about, but I don't believe it takes away nor necessarily adds to, but I want to do what's best and work with everybody in doing what's best here. So I just hope you are willing to look at the whole picture and support this, because it can be a great thing for our city, and that's what we need.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
I have one.
Councilman Graham?
So, Ms. Johnson, you're saying that the inclusion of the church should not be an issue for us voting tonight?
No, because Well, I mean, it should be considered, so that's not what I'm saying, it should be considered, but a vote no, or stop, or wait, or start over is detrimental to the people in this area. The people that have been told no so many times before, when we talk about Black history or people that have lived in this area, some of these people have been moved around 2 or 3 times. They have lost money in this city because of having to move around. And so if their property is threatened, we're talking apple and oranges. We're talking about her church wanting to be included historically as far as their information when it doesn't take away or add to. And we're talking about people in their homes and people, like I said, that have been moved all around and a possibility that their homes may be picked off one or another. And they're not being able to fix it. If they get a big storm that comes through and they can't put any more than 50% of what the assessed value of their home is in it, it leads to deterioration of their home. So when I look at this big picture, I see who is really at stake or who is at loss of possibly losing something is the homeowners. And when she says I represent my church, and the church says vote no on this or wait or come back and do this later, no, too much has been invested in this, and the majority of the homeowners say, look, we have pride in our homes. We care about it. We want to work together and build something great here. We don't want to wait, start over, lose all the money that's been invested and the time and the energy and the study. And the study that Jenny and these people have been doing is not coming from just Jenny. She may have her race, but she's working with people of all races. There's all people of all races living in that area that are telling their story. They're interviewing people from all areas from that area. And so I have to speak the truth here and let everybody know what is really going on. Because I know, because I'm working with them, and I'm working with a lot of other organizations throughout this group, and I can't let this go without sharing the information. And other people are going to come and speak, people that live in these areas, And like I said, it disheartens me to see a divide of people that I care about. And I care about that church. I was a member of that church for 20-some years. But the bottom line is the church is not at risk. And there's ways of working with the church and including the church's history in other areas, because it's going to be in that area. And just like Second Christian Church, that history will be included all along that area as we can build together and work together. And we can do that. And we're doing it. The people are doing it and working with organizations that are willing to work with us.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If anybody would like to come speak, and welcome.
No, I'm fine. No, I'm going to get through this. I have a presentation slide that needs to be put up. Okay, my name is Glover Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the Historic Foot and Lafayette Street District. It's just kind of amazing to me to hear all this rhetoric tonight. We also met with Ms. Smith and her husband over a year and a half ago, talking about this area. We too wanted to be included in the conversations with this area, and we were excluded. One of the things that, if you know anything about me, I think all of you have received a copy of a document that I wrote called The Bold New Plan. And I think some of you were at the dedication on Lafayette Street of the memorial plaque that we had installed to not let the memory of Lafayette Street and the Foot District ever be forgotten. If you will remember, in my plan, we talked about enlarging the district ourselves. We were going to do it from Jackson to Clark Avenue, from McCarty to Franklin Street, which was where Lafayette Street originally ended before they built the high school. The slide that you see on the screen now was our attempt to present to the neighborhood a economic development package. This was brought to the forefront because we looked at the history of Lafayette Street and the commercial district that was destroyed. And so my brother and I, being the executive directors of the organization, we decided that as part of our plan, we were going to put back an economic development package for the neighborhood, the area, and the city as a whole. I heard Mrs. Smith talk about that if these homes were lost, you were going to lose property taxes. Well, I think if you look at this structure here, this is going to bring a lot of tax dollars into the city also. And we tried to pick out a structure that was not demonstratively just horrible to the community. We felt we wanted to do something that gives a sense like a bank. It looks solid, it's going to be there for a while, and it's not futuristic. It's something that would enhance the community that we're going to put it in. Now, I have met with an economic development team out of St. Louis, and they were sorry that they couldn't be here tonight, but they did give me the instructions to say that we are still in talks with potential developers to provide this facade here to that area. We have spoken to two of the previous presidents of Lincoln University. They have endorsed this project, stating that they felt that this would be an economic development package that would benefit the university through providing jobs to its students, providing housing, providing shopping, all within walking distance of the campus. Now, again, we've met with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I think we've met with a large number of the council members to share what our plans were for this. And like Quinn Chapel, we wanted to be inclusive in the talks about developing this district, and we were excluded. And so this is where I'm having a problem. Now, along with Quinn Chapel, I don't know, could I ask that the screen be put back up showing the boundaries? If you look at the map there, at the very top is McCarty Street, and you see where they did the indentation to include those homes there on the right side of Lafayette Street. Well, now, if they wanted to talk about the historic significance of the area, if they would have continued east on McCarty Street, 3 more houses, they would have picked up a house from a very noted civil rights activist that was in the turn of the century, and it was a Reverend, I believe it was Sloan, don't quote me on that, but he was very prominent in the black community and to do the civil rights activities back in the early 1900s and late 1800s. Now, again, like Quinn Chapel, that wasn't included in their historic district. Now, if you go back to the testimony that was given, all of these homes are in floodplain. Yes, they're looking to try to save their investments because of the 50% rule. But I agree with Reverend Gould that I think that this should either be put on the informal calendar or just stopped altogether and let them come back and start over and be more inclusive of what the real purpose of the historic district should be. We at the Friends of Lafayette Street, we're not opposed to the historic district by any stretch of the imagination. We would like for them to go back, rethink it, and then include everybody that should be included in that thought process. So that's it for me.
Any questions? Councilman Prather?
If you were to be included in with this structure, would you be able to build, would you be able to build the same structure if it was a historic district?
From what I understand from conversations with the potential developers, when you have a historic district, it's like an onion. You're adding more layers to the development process. Now, I just read articles in the paper about this new development that the city is wanting to plan at the MSP area. you know it takes a considerable amount of time and effort to plan these things. Right now, as I said, we spoke to Mr. and Mrs. Smith about a year and a half ago, and we shared with them this plan, and knowing that we had to go through these processes. So, like Reverend Gould said, we've met with the mayor, we've met with Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Reverend Gould, and we've tried to come to some kind of an understanding where that we could all make this a happy medium. Now, I think a historic district, when you look at it, you have historic buildings, and then you have historic history. Now, the historic buildings of what was really the heart of the black community is gone and can never be brought back. So what I'm saying is that as part of the executive director of the Friends of Lafayette Street, it has always been my intention to bring an economic development package back to that community. Now, myself, my family, my brother, we have nothing, we have not a penny invested, not a penny to gain. We are bringing this back to the community as part of what we feel was what should have been done in the 60s. And so what we're doing now is we're offering this to the community. And I think if you look at any area, and I think the trend now is for the neighborhood plans, I think Mr. and Mrs. Smith should be delighted that they have a facade like this where they can walk to the corner and go have dinner, or where they can go shop and buy a gallon of milk, whatever they need. And so we're not trying to impede upon the historic nature that they want to put there. But like Reverend Gould said, let's just call a spade a spade. Let's not look at this facade of we're trying to save the historic nature of the community. These people are trying to save their investment dollars. So if we really could ask for the council, we feel that it either should be put on the informal calendar and let some more time go by to where all the sides can have conversation, or kill it right off the bat and let them go back and start over. So that's where I'm at.
Further questions? Councilwoman Ward?
Hi, Mr. Brown. How are you? Are you a current landowner or property owner in this proposed district?
No, I am not.
Okay, so it won't affect you at this point.
It won't affect me, but it will affect the memories of what my mother and father gave their lives up for in trying to have something, as I've said in a previous news article. As a result of urban renewal, we not only lost our legacy, our livelihood, we lost our homes. And so this area, School Street area, is the last vestige of property that can be developed by what was then, I guess you would say, descendants of the original black community.
So how many of those historic structures there on Lafayette would you have to tear down in order to build new development there?
Well, 408, which is owned by the city, and we think that that would resolve one of the issues that the city has about what to do with 408. And so the other one is the building on the corner, which is now an apartment building, and we've already had some preliminary discussions with the owners of that building, and they have agreed to continue discussions about us purchasing that building for our project. And then the building immediately to the west, we've talked to the owners there. So we're only looking at the 408 property and two buildings, one on the corner and then the one immediately adjacent to that. That's it.
So 3 historic structures that contribute to a historic neighborhood.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So it would be 3 historic structures that contribute to an already intact historic neighborhood.
Well, I think if you look at their application, the 2 buildings that we're looking at that are not owned by the city were not included as historic buildings in their application.
The one on the corner of Lafayette and
McCarty,
which is that historic duplex.
It's
I believe it's on there.
I think they have 6 apartments there.
Yeah, I think it has 2 front doors, or yeah.
Okay, and then the one immediately to the west of that. Now, we've
They're
already,
within that boundary line.
right, and we've already talked to the owners of those properties, and they have agreed to continue talks on selling those properties for the project.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, our next speaker. Next, let's see, we just did opposition. So we just did opposition, so our next speaker, are you our next speaker in support? I forgot to clarify that. In support? We're trying to alternate. Okay, that's fine, come on up.
A little bit of both. A little bit of both. I really am glad, and I'm pleased that we'll.
Could you give us your name for
First
the
of all,
record,
my
too?
name is
Thank you.
Sheila Logan Sims. I am a lifelong resident of Jefferson, the city of Jefferson. I watched them tear down my Grandma Logan's house and put her up on Jackson Street. I watched them tear down my dad's shoe shop, and all in the name of urban renewal, that all of this was supposed to have been put back together. I watched them move Quinn Chapel from here to there to wherever they wanted it to be. See, I remember when Quinn Chapel was there, they had tent meetings. Yeah, lifelong resident of Jefferson City. I watched Quinn Chapel build their church there. I watched them do the renovation. They have done everything. Now, you know what? They're talking about, I talked to a young lady earlier before the meeting, and she was talking about it was all about the edifice. You could look at Quinn Chapel's edifice if they hadn't torn it down, okay? The city tore it down to put up that exit up off of Lafayette Street onto the highway. So it's not their fault. So I think somewhere in their the thing that they're presenting, that there needs to be an addendum, okay, an addendum to include Quinn Chapel, and that says it's not their fault that they had to move. That we could have looked at the historical value of the edifice if it hadn't been torn down for the improvement of the city of Jefferson. So I think we just need to take a breath. Okay, just like I didn't know if I was for or against. I just had something to say. Just say something. You know, I think take a deep breath, ladies and gentlemen, and breathe. You know, breathing is fundamental. Okay, breathing is fundamental. Understand that there's a reason why Quinn Chapel, they keep talking about the edifice business of it. You know, addendum, we are including them because we took their church, the edifice. We took the edifice, but you cannot take the church of the people, okay? And the people have remained the same. They have moved according to the improvement of the city of Jefferson. That's not their fault. Do not punish them for that. Nobody needs to have a spanking tonight, okay? We don't need to spank anybody, okay? Just understand that somewhere there needs to be an addendum that says, yes, we are going to include them because their edifice was torn down for the improvement of the city of Jefferson, and allow them to be included in that. Allow them to do that. And that's you know, I just want everybody, you know, to be on the same page. And sometimes, like I said, it takes a deep breath. Everybody breathe. Let it out. Good things in, bad stuff out. Okay? Breathe. You know, and be careful about the I, me, my thing going on. Okay? Watch out, I, me, my. Okay? Because I, me, my will get you in trouble every time. all we're saying is, all I'm saying, I don't know what everybody has to say, because I was just standing here by myself, but all I'm saying is that allow Quinn Chapel addendum. They make addendums all the time. How many addendums do we have to the Constitution? Hello? A bunch. A bunch, because somebody changed their mind and somebody said, oops, we forgot that. Oops. We have a oops. Hi, Madam President, we have a oops. Madam, I made you, Terry, I just made you the president. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, we have a oops going on. We have a oops, and we can fix a oops without anybody's feelings being hurt. You know, just say, get off of it. That business about the structure is not in line with the other historical structures, because if the city of Jefferson had gone through all the challenges of lifting up that church and putting it on that other corner, guess what? The structure would have been the structure. They tell me my time is up. You know, I could talk forever, but anyway, addendum.
Thank you very much.
Addendum.
All right.
Are y'all breathing? Breathe.
All right. Okay, so next speaker, please. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Turgeon, members of the City Council. Excuse me, my name is Mary Shantz. I live at 1928 Hazelton. And I'm the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. Your HPC considered the application for the School Street Local Historic District. We held a public informational meeting and a public hearing about the proposal. And after due consideration, the Historic Preservation Commission approved the application for the local historic district. As this was a first-time process for the city and for us, certainly, we took special care to assure that the application was given full consideration. We did deliberate, thoughtful consideration, and we felt the importance of our role. This was the first time. This was a very important step. After the process had been completed, the Historic Preservation Commission felt that the application had indeed met, in fact more than met, the requirements to be approved as our very first local historic district, and voted to approve the application. I'm sure that each one of the members of the commission had their own special reason for, you know, listening to the testimony and their things that stuck out to them, but I just wanted to share with you a few of the things that stuck out to me in the process. First off was the extent of the history of the people of the neighborhood, of the contribution of that neighborhood to the community, not just to the community, but in many times to the state of Missouri and to our nation from the people who live there. Second was the testimony of many of the people that came to testify in support of the application who had actually lived there as children, lived in that neighborhood. Some had returned and talked about the significance of that neighborhood and what it had meant to them. And then third, that impressed me, were two reports that had been commissioned by the City Council, one in 1992 and one in 1995 by the Urbana Group, one looking at South Side and one looking at East Side. And in both reports, throughout the reports, they were looking, I believe, just to determine structures that would meet the definition for a National Historical Register. But throughout those reports, the Urbana Group said to the city of Jefferson a few things that struck me with this. One was that being on the National Register does not protect a historic resource. That a local historic district is the only way really to protect the historic neighborhood. They talked a little bit about the design review, but then they went on and they gave some examples in, I believe, the 1992 report, where they talked about examples of, had Jefferson City at the time had some kind of a local historic district or established something, some of the neighborhoods that we drive by every day wouldn't look the way they do today. And they gave specific examples of the 900 block on the east side of Jefferson Street, Madison Street, and then on East Elm, where infill was buildings that were just not necessarily historic in nature. So that impressed me, but I think mostly on those reports, the thing that impressed me was that a local designation is the only way to protect the character of a historic neighborhood, and they specifically cited School Street as an excellent example of an area which probably does not retain enough integrity to be included in the National Register, but which retains the charming character which the city may want to protect. So this was in 1990, that was out of the 1995 report. This is a special first local historic district. I think the standard for this application, the quality of the research and the application has set a good standard from which we can continue in the future. It will pave a way for many other new districts in the city to rise up. And with that, I would encourage you to support the application for the School Street Local Historic District. Thank you.
Thank you for your service to the commission as well. It's volunteers, and we appreciate all your time on that. Are there any questions? Councilman Fitzwater?
Mike, thank you very much for being here. And I understand this has been a grueling process. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there that night. I tried to get there, but I had other conflicts. I couldn't get there, so I appreciate the work. But I have gone, the staff has done a great job of sending us a lot of documentation, so I've tried to spend a lot of time on this issue. And just had a couple questions. I've gone through the minutes of that meeting, and I think it started with staff giving their presentation, which I think Mr. Barron indicated that their recommendation at the end of the process. I think we showed there was a 4-2 vote. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
So did one member not vote?
I believe one member, either one member short or one member was not there that night, Jamie. I have to look to you.
She left because it shows 7 members there, so.
Oh, the chair does not vote.
Okay.
Unless it's a tie. I'm sorry, duh.
The folks that testified, Ms. Smith opened it up. There was a question raised in regard to the FEMA issue. Have you all been able to dig into that? Because I know we've gotten direction both ways. We've got correspondence in regard to that issue. Have you been able to?
The Historic Preservation Commission has not. I know the staff testified that night, and I believe subsequently I have seen communications between FEMA and the applicant and the city about what would happen if the local historic designation was given in terms of would the 50% rule no longer apply. But I'm not an expert on that. Mr. Fitzwater, I really can't answer the question other than to say there has been communication with both the applicant and the city that has come back and forth between them and FEMA.
There was a reference made tonight that there's a waiver process.
Correct.
Has anybody does that have to be done after the historic district, or could they apply for the waiver now?
Again, you're outside of my expertise. I apologize.
Okay.
I know there's somebody here tonight that can answer that question.
And then Mr. Hernandez raised the issue in regard to the 50% substantial improvement rule, which we've been aware of. Ms. Beadham, who's kind of led some of the discussions and talked about, and Mr. Hernandez and Ms. Beadham talked about the fact that there are not a lot of owner-occupied properties in that area.
Mm-hmm.
I think he quoted 80%, she quoted 20. 80% were not, so it'd be 20% were owner-occupied, 25% was what Ms. Beadham said. Did that raise any comment from the
It did not.
historic?
To my recollection, we heard those statistics, but it did not raise any particular alarm or concern.
And then Dr. Gould was there. This meeting was on May the 1st, and the comment that they reflected in the minutes was she had requested the matter be put on hold so that more people could weigh into the matter to see what was feasible for the area. Was that taken into consideration as part of the?
Well, certainly, the commission could have, I suppose, done that, but there was a motion made and seconded that the district be approved, and the motion passed.
So my point is the request she made tonight was made on May the 1st, and now we're at council 2 months later addressing basically the same request.
Right. And I have to be honest with you, I don't know for certain, but I'm not certain that it is within the Historic Preservation Commission's purview to make a determination like that. I think that would be something that would be more for the city council unless the applicant withdrew their application. Again, I'm not an attorney, but it just seems like our role was to look at the historic aspect of this application, and did it meet the criteria? I believe there are 10 or 11 criteria that have to be met, and because the Historic Preservation Commission are people that have expertise and knowledge on historic issues, and so they were kind of, I think the Historic Preservation Commission gets that job to determine, is there a historic value in what's before us? Just like on demolitions, when we make a decision on can an applicant for a demolition of a home over 100 years, we look at the historic nature, make a determination. And so I think that what we were looking at was the criteria met that the applicant was asked to meet? And in the opinion of the majority of the members, it was.
But, so you don't have a mechanism, I mean, we have informal calendar, I realize you don't have as structured a mechanism.
Right.
And then it also quotes, as Mr. Brown indicated, he had asked for the same thing, to delay the decision until more folks could be brought into the decision-making process. So again, now a couple months later, we're hearing the same request from Mr. Brown. And then it quotes some other folks who were both for and against. And then getting back to the staff recommendation, with the 4-2 vote, meaning there's only a 1-vote swing, really. I mean, if one vote would have went the other way, it would have been a 3-3. That did not raise any concern with the commission, with all the testimony, with the staff recommendation, that maybe a delay would be
It did not come up. When the application, when the vote was taken and it was approved, we moved on. I think that, you always wish that the decisions were unanimous. I mean, that's a perfect world. It wasn't. But no, there was not. We didn't like come back and say, well, maybe we should rethink this, or maybe we should, because the vote was 4-2. On demolition applications, we will have not unanimous decisions sometimes.
Usually those are, sometimes it's good to have folks on the opposite side.
That's true.
As Mary indicated, I appreciate it. I'm not trying to grill you, I'm just
No,
trying
no,
to get
that's
to the
fine.
bottom, because there's obviously a big difference of opinion on how folks think we ought to proceed, and I just want to make sure that we have the information.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilman Ward?
I'd like to have our city councilor kind of respond to some of those questions. I know that the Historic Preservation Commission on another topic, was it 40 and 408 came to you guys? That was their desire to delay it. And they were instructed by the counselor that they could not do that by their bylaws and their ordinance. So with something like this, would that have been, I think it was just their take that they do have to vote on issues that do come to them when they do.
Right. The code that Chapter 8, 8047 sub 4 requires that the Historic Preservation Commission actually take up a vote. Only the applicant is eligible to ask for a continuance in writing, and so absent that that request in writing from the applicant for a continuance, the board really, or the commission, doesn't have any authority to grant a continuance on their own motion.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. All right, so our next speaker. Welcome.
Good evening. My name's Perry Douglas, and I'm a member of that little church on the foot. I first came to Jefferson City in 1947. The first thing my parents did was take my brother and I over on Miller Street and join Quinn Chapel AME Church. It bewilders me that even the thought of us not being included in a historic movement such as this. It's a little modern church at 415, but if you look on the roof, that steeple came from the church on the foot down at 529. If you go in our doors, there's stained glass windows. They came from that little church on the foot at 529 Lafayette. If you look a little further, you'll see columns. They came from the front porch of the little church on the foot. We don't want to be forgotten historically. I'm in no way opposed to historic movements, but I am opposed to my church being overlooked or forgotten. All we want to do is to be a part of a historic movement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. My name is Jocelyn King, 901 Rolling Court, Jefferson City, Missouri. Hello to all of you. This is getting to be emotional here. My family has been a part of this community since 1970. Both of my parents at Lincoln University a long time. I went to Jeff City High School. I left for a long time and came back. Quinn Chapel's always been here. When I first came to town, I was asked if that was where I'm going to church. Unfortunately, I said no, only because I'm a part of a different denomination, but I've heard so many wonderful things about Quinn Chapel over the years. When I first saw the notice of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I was at that meeting last month, why did I go? It was talking about making everything green space. You know, this neighborhood, green space. Now, I have to give it to you. I love the greenway system going through the town. I walk my dog a mile a day. But we don't need any more parkland and green space and greenway right here. We need this community and the people. And there are some people who don't have things quite as pleasant as they should be because they're in the floodplain. You know, there are certain things that they cannot do with their homes. If, you know, it really gets bad and they try to move, they can't really get out of the home what they put into the home. And this could be my family because when we first moved here, we were on Lafayette, right in the floodplain. But it was just due to other circumstances and logistics that we had to move, and we moved just right around the corner to Rolling Court. So that's why I was here. I did not want to see just gradually green space develop, which is very conceivable. If these homeowners have to live with the floodplain rule and not be able to get their investment of what they've done, the money that's needed to make repairs. There's so many of us who were victimized by the windstorms that came through here. Tore up my backyard, another neighbor tore the roof off, and this had nothing to do with the floodplain. When it comes to getting money to fix these things, that's where it comes in. So I would like to see the neighborhood spared for that reason and included in the historic district. If this proceeds now and Quinn Chapel is not included, I don't look at that as overlook. I don't look at that as abandonment, because when you are a part of this community, you have a love for everything in it. Lincoln University, Quinn Chapel, and everything else. Okay? I look at it as a building stone. Okay? If we can't get the whole thing right now, let's start with what we got. Okay? Ms. Smith, you know, put a lot of work into this, And it may not have been the same thoughts of everybody else, but there is a thing where it helps us, and it helps us all, to have this historic district. And I don't want any more green space. That's number one. Number two, my father is a Lutheran pastor, so I understand some other things too. I understand when one door opens, or closes rather, another door can open. If the door closes with this chapter, with only this chapter of the historic district, the door is not closed. There is another door that will open. Ask and it shall be given, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door will be open unto you. And you know, sometimes we have to knock and knock and knock. We have to be creative. We have to find new resources. But the door is not closed. One other little comment I wanted to make. For 20 years, my father was pastor at a church I bet nobody's heard of in here, but it was just about 20 miles down the road. Pilgrim Lutheran Church in Freedom, Missouri. Freedom is like a little suburb of Lynn that was named Freedom right after the Civil War. They are this year celebrating 150 years. They've been through many obstacles. They've been through growth. They've been through growing pains. But they not only celebrated 150 years, but it was something very unusual I could not believe. I was not a part of the celebration there, by the way, but the members there who still know us kept us informed. On May 27th, the weekend of Memorial Day, the editorial page, I've never seen anything like this. It was a big color cartoon picture of the church. Pilgrim Lutheran Church celebrates 150 years. Who has ever seen that? Okay? And it told a bit about its history. I bring this out because that church has never been a part of a historic district per se, but it is still historical. Quinn Chapel will always be the historical pinnacle of this community. I can appreciate a lot of buildings built after the Civil War, and I have a greater appreciation for those built during and before the Civil War and survived. And I'm just talk about that because, that's just something close to my heart. And Quinn is part of this community. So Quinn is a part of our love, everybody in this room. But if this is approved, this historical district as it is, to help some of our brothers and sisters in this community, to help their living, and in my estimation, keep away the green space.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't want to cut anyone off, but I know we've gone beyond,
But
a little
you
well
got
beyond,
my
so I want to
idea.
make sure we keep it moving.
And I
so
thank you for your
thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
And our next speaker, please. Thank you. And if council has any questions, I'll let y'all just raise your hand or speak up if you do. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Sherilyn Woodruff, and I don't want to be redundant, but I do want to say that I am a lifelong member of Jefferson City. I have been in the community 74 years. I am one of the 2 parishioners that have been at all 3 locations. I had to move, as we've heard over and over tonight, from Miller Street. I was 12 when we moved to 529 Lafayette, and we would still be there had it not been for the relocation to our new facility. All I want to say tonight is that we are not opposed to this School Street Historical District, but we would like our heritage, our legacy to be included in this district. We want to continue to be recognized for the work that we have done in the community, the spiritual work we've done, the just to be included. We're not opposed to the district that has been approved, not approved, but proposed. But please, just give us some consideration and just take time to look at our perspective, please.
Thank you. Welcome.
Madam Mayor and the City Council. My name is Tammy Beshen, and I live at 728 Deer Creek Road in Jefferson City. I am also the president of the Historic City of Jefferson. I sent by email a letter, which each of you should have received, including the mayor, about the thoughts from Historic City of Jefferson. And so you should have those in your possession, but I would like to just reiterate a section of that that I wrote to you. The Historic City of Jefferson supports the creation of this local historic district, and in particular, I ask that you consider the following. Those who own property in this area want this designation, including the design guidelines, and that is shown because 75% of these owners, including the mayor on behalf of 408 Lafayette Street with the city, signed the petitions for such. Secondly, the written and verbal comments submitted by the public for the Historic Preservation Commission in May and the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting in June, and what I've heard tonight, overwhelmingly support this designation. The question may be the boundaries, but the support for a district like this, for this district in particular, is there from the public. The city holds certified local government, or CLG status, which was created to help communities save the irreplaceable historic character of places, a certification that requires local government to demonstrate their commitment to historic preservation in order to be eligible for certain funding along with other benefits. And fourth, the city staff had already been directed to revise the local historic district criteria to make the process easier for applications and the acceptance of applications. So to go through this process has been very tedious and very draining and very eating up a lot of resources to even get to this point with the current regulations that are in place with the city code right now. So with those considerations, I would ask that you vote in favor of Bill 2018-021 tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. I won't be long. My name is Lori Sims, and I am another lifelong member of Quinn Chapel, and I am on the Board of Trustees for the building, for the church. My parents moved here in 1958, and while I was born here, I never experienced the business district on Lafayette that you've heard other people talk about, because by the time I was old enough to know what was going on, it was gone. There were hotels, there were grocery stores. I don't know where Mr. Perry went and Miss Sherry. They could tell you all of the things that were in that very vibrant, striving district. It's all gone. It was supposed to come back after urban renewal. That was the agreement the city made, and the only business that is still there is Carolyn Johnson's barber and beauty shop because her father threatened to sue the city if they didn't give it back. Everything that I've heard today preserves buildings, not history. And while it is very important that we find a way to help these property owners, I feel for them being in a floodplain with all the restrictions that are upon them. Nothing that I've heard said that there's any guarantee that this district will help them. The applicants say that this is going to revitalize the area, but nobody has said how. Nobody has spoken to any economic development, just preserving these buildings and calling it a historic district. And I will just be honest, because I don't know how to do anything but be blunt. Given the history of Jefferson City, when it comes to the historic black neighborhoods, I have no confidence that this will actually benefit us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. Any other speakers this evening? Welcome.
Madam Mayor and Council. I've been in every public hearing we've had here, and I've heard all of the comments all along. And I've been in, as Mr. Brown says, conversations with him for some time. And we met at least on one occasion at Quinn Chapel. And it's apparent that we're not all going to agree with what was discussed in those meetings, but the first time I heard the word inclusion was at the P&Z meeting last month. I did hear that people were being excluded, and I was at a meeting at Quinn Chapel with the mayor and Mr. Sanders, and we primarily talked about the economic development plan. And there were two developers there from Ferguson that were brought in to talk about that. And that has been the focus of all the discussions in the past. It hasn't been about, please include us. So I just want to say that's my recollection. And some of you were there, at least at that meeting. And if you attended the 3 meetings that were held in this building, you didn't hear the word inclusion. You heard, stop it, let's think it over. I've got a plan I want to present to the city. That's what we heard up until the last meeting at P&Z. So does Jefferson City want a local historic district? That you're going to decide that tonight. The opponents of the historic district don't really want this district. And failure to approve this district will, in my opinion, seriously damage any chances for a future historic district in this city. I did a quick survey and called around today. I excluded Kansas City and St. Louis, but Springfield has 3 local historic districts like the one that's being proposed here. Cape Girardeau has 1. Poplar Bluff has 1. And Columbia has 5 such districts to protect historic buildings. If you really can't, if you would prefer to have a plaque down there next to the tennis courts versus buildings that actually would be maintained and keep the integrity of a neighborhood that once existed, then maybe a plaque's all we're going to get out of this down the road. But that's not what I want. The school street request meets all requirements set out in the city ordinances, sections 844 to 846, to form a local historic district. And if you exclude the 5 properties owned by government, 90% of the property owners signed the petition. The HPC approved the historic district, as you heard, and approved the design guidelines. Planning and zoning was invited to completely review the process again last month. And they took a neutral stance because they didn't sound like they really wanted to make a decision on it. So there's been a lot of opposition at every step of the way in this process, even before we began to gather signatures. But a local historic district has many benefits, and this is about property and it's about preservation. But most of the school street properties are in the floodplain, and it's hard to maintain and preserve such properties in America. So I invite you to read your own city forms, number 200 and 204, which explain how the federal, state, and city governments impose rules on private property owners in floodplains. In paragraph 1, it clearly states the rules are a hidden cost that actually reduces the value of the structures. And no owner in this district bought any of these properties knowing any of that at all before they bought the property. And in form number 200, it clearly states this information is actually mostly learned after the fact by a property owner after they buy the property. One commissioner at the P&Z meeting said he felt the applicants were trying to circumvent federal FEMA rules, but that's not really true. In 2008, there's a 2008 FEMA publication entitled Floodplain Management Requirements that Provide Relief for Historic Structures. It sets out the rules, it's not vague, and in your packet on May 29th, the city administrator sent a letter to the State Historic District Preservation Officer requesting clarification on this point. Can a certified local government, such as Jefferson City, allow relief as described in the 2008 FEMA publication I just cited? So we've talked with city, state, and FEMA officials since the P&Z meeting. No one rule will fit all of these properties. I hope to work, if you approve this, I hope to work on a couple of test cases, but it's not a one-size-fits-all. And one approach described in the FEMA rule is that a property owner will apply for a variance. He will go to your floodplain manager and he will say, I want to do this, and he will also go to the HPC and show his plans. Two separate processes. So if we approve a school street local historic district, it's a good first step, and additional districts could be built off of that. So I hope we can get this done.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Arthur Brown. Live at 714 Clark Avenue. I'm 74 years old, and I'm a foot rat. You know what that is, Carlos? You know what that is, don't you, Mr. Schreiber? I was raised on Lafayette Street. I've only got one or two comments. I'm not opposed to the school street project. I don't want to see a green space down there either. But these people brought this property knowing it was in the floodplain. Then they find out that FEMA's got a rule on them. I've got one question. If you had it to do over again, would you do it?
Any further speakers this evening? Okay. Welcome.
My name is Carolyn Lou Cave. I'm a life resident of Jefferson City, born in 214 Montana Street, and graduate of Lincoln University. Lived on Locust Street. The highway came through and took our property along with the rest of Elm and the other section of streets at in that area. The only thing I have to say, I've been listening all evening, I'm in agreement of making the Black Historical Area because, as they've said, our foot was taken away years ago and all our businesses. But I'm also want to ask the question, what about doing addendum and adding the church to this project instead of starting all over again. And thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers this evening? Okay, seeing none, or there is, okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. I'm new here. I've just been here a little bit over a year from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My name is Mentha Bakari, and I live at 1310 Linden Drive. I'm a real community-minded person, and I have seen where something like this, the discussion you all are having now, where neighborhoods are supposed to be preserved that were once very flourishing, and now trying to bring that back. What I've heard this evening is we don't want to lose our property. We want to be assured of financial security if there's a flood. I've heard that mostly. And I really would like to see folks working together. I really would like to see that. Being new here, I'd like to add to the community, and I just don't want to see a lot of splintering and the kinds of things that I've seen when neighborhoods have been split up in other places. I grew up in Chicago, and when things like this occur, invariably the historical piece that's said to be the impetus for these kinds of things gets lost in the financial stuff. I hope that folks will do the right thing so that when I talk to the folks in Milwaukee, I can say, you know, these people really got it going on here. They really working together. I really want to see that happen here as a newcomer. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else to speak this evening before we close the public hearing? Welcome.
Hi, my name is Anquinette. I'm a member of Second Christian Church, and I do support. Also, I'm really emotional right now because Quinn Chapel is right behind where my grandmother used to live, and I used to come down that alley, you know, so the whole Lafayette, you know, is all we got, you know, and so, you know, I had a thought for a moment, like, hey, what happened to our annex, and because that is a big part of Lafayette Street as well. You know, it was a lot of things that went on, you know, so I think that if you all take a moment, you know, if that's all we got, when people come, they go straight to Lafayette Street. You know, so why not beautify it? Why not let Quinn Chapel? Why not? I wish our church, Second Christian Church, would have known about it so we could have got in. Because that's really where a lot of the stuff happened, you know, where everybody used to hang out at, you know, so we can come together as one and make this whole thing happen, you know, and I'm just hoping that it will come together the way that God would have it to come together. Yeah, our annex is, and we happened to, when they had that windstorm, it blew our roof off, and when they made that green land, and we had a flood in our basement, you know, and they took our parking space, and you know, why not give us something back? Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers this evening? Welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Reverend Kimberly Woodruff. I am a member of and on the ministerial staff at Quinn Chapel. I was born and raised here in Jefferson City. My family has been here since 1928. I am a third generation lifelong member of Quinn Chapel. My parents bought and I grew up in the first house that's on Rowland Street, that was built on Rowland Street, right around the corner and up the street from where Patsy lives now, right up the street from where the Kings lived on Rowland Court. I agree that Jefferson City should have historic districts, many of them when you look at the history of Jefferson City. And I agree that the area that's being discussed tonight should be one. I'm also a community organizer for the Jefferson City chapter of Missouri Faith Voices, and there's people who are here tonight and who have been here in the past meetings who are involved with that organization who are on both sides of the discussion. Since I took this job in January, I've been working with those individuals and other individuals and also organizations in this city to unite the community. And there's many ways that we can unite a community, but one thing that I know is that in order to unite a community, all voices of that community need to be heard, or at least have the opportunity to be heard. And I think that one of those voices, among many other institutions of African American origination in this city, haven't been heard. And I think that we ought to have the opportunity to be at the table so that all of the voices of Quinn Chapel and other institutions can be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak this evening? Seeing none, the last step of the public hearing is to allow the applicant a chance for closing comments. Thank you. Does the applicant want to make any closing comments? Mrs. Smith.
I appreciate all the comments from the community, and we feel like this is our application is a very positive thing for the community of the Foot. And I must admit, I'm really flummoxed by the opposition that we've encountered, because I dabble in history. I'm with the Historic City of Jefferson and have done the newsletter for 10 years, and we've covered history of the Foot on many occasions, and I'm very interested in the history of that area. And my heart is in capturing history. And so when this opportunity came up to do this historic district, I was thinking, this will be great for this community. We'll bring awareness. We'll let all of Jefferson City learn and appreciate the culture here, just like we've learned and appreciated Old Munichburg. Now, this is on a very small scale because, as I explained earlier, we just don't have the resources to do a large-scale community. Now, I would say that I want to make a point too about white people trying to tell black history. Well, this is my history too. This is a white person telling white history and black history. So I would argue that this is Jefferson City history, and nobody owns it. And I can tell what I know about it, and I've done a lot of reading, and I haven't lived it. I haven't lived it like these residents have, but I'm learning, and we can all learn from them. And I hope to capture all of their oral history in a project that is a program that's sponsored by Historic City of Jefferson, where we will gather all the oral histories of all these people that spoke tonight. We want to hear their experiences in this neighborhood. We want to compile those histories. We would like to do a bigger area, but right now, as I said, we do not have the resources to go beyond what we're doing right now. We've been told by the city staff that we can't we can't change our boundaries without starting over again. Now, if the council has a way of doing that without making us start from zero, we have no opposition to including them. It has always been in our initial conversations with Mr. Brown and Reverend Gould. It always centered on economic development in that area, and we would hear Mr. Brown's plans for that block. And honestly, this is an honest disagreement. I just don't recall them asking to be part of this district. We'll have an honest disagreement about that. I mean, we all recall different things, but I would ask you to consider redrawing these lines for their benefit and not making us start over again. And I would ask that they agree to sign the petition to be part of this neighborhood, and they'd have to comply with the design guidelines. So that would be we're perfectly fine with that. But honestly, very honestly, we did not really understand that they wanted to be a part of this district. So.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. So at this time, I will close the public hearing portion, and we will take up Bill 2018-021.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, establishing a local historic district to be named the School Street Local Historic District and adoption of associated building design requirements.
Okay, so at this time, we will have council deliberation and questions among each other and questions of staff. And I'll start with some deliberation. That I appreciate everybody's patience in being here late this evening and hearing all of the opinions and taking the interest to come here to this and several other meetings before, including council and their input and involvement. And to those that wrote the historic nomination, I know that takes a lot of time and effort. I think that has brought forward that there are some flaws in that process and the historic district. Although we want to see those happen in our community, we are basing it off of sort of an old model, and it's my understanding from city staff that there may be some updates that could be made to make the process better and more streamlined. So those are things I think we can look at, because I think it's evident after going through this one that there may be things that could be made better for the future. So I would look to city staff to give us some guidance on what those things could be. Looking at this particular one, it wasn't that long ago, well, I guess it has been a while, so I guess that's relative, but when there was the 5-5 vote on this particular property at 408 Lafayette of whether to tear it down, and I voted, broke the tie to tear down the property, and ultimately the goal was not to tear it down. The reason I made that vote was to get the process moving forward, to give a sense of urgency so that perhaps somebody would come forward knowing the urgency to save that property. Because the one thing I kept hearing over and over from most testimony tonight is that they do not want to see that as green space, which was the ultimate path it was going down. And really that came to us sort of from a higher power, somebody above the city council level that came to us knowing that we didn't really have the ultimate decision-making authority, and we did have to follow as a city and as a council certain rules that came forward. We did not have the ultimate authority to say, well, just let it be, because we knew that we could be charged with paying back significant amount of dollars for that property, somewhere to the tune of perhaps $70,000, and we knew that we had that looming over us, and so we knew that we had to act. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have had to have the vote and have the 5-5 and have the mayor act to break that tie. So we've had other things that make this unique. But the fact that it's unique, I think, can also make it better in the long run, but it also makes it harder as we're moving through this. There's not a clear path, there's not a clear vision, but I think the clearest vision is I don't hear anyone saying they want to see green space. So out of the 5-5 vote to demolish that particular property, it went to Historic Preservation Commission. We knew that that allowed a 60-day extension. We knew that this would get it out in the media, it would get it out to the public. Maybe somebody would want to buy that property. It's not necessarily for sale. It was for sale. We didn't have interested buyers. So we're just trying to revive interest that maybe somebody would want to, whether it's a neighbor, a citizen, a property owner who already lives there, somebody who could convince somebody of the value of buying that property, or perhaps, as Mr. Brown mentioned, a developer would want to come in and make that purchase. So at the meeting at Quinn Chapel, that was something I really stressed, is the importance of, please help find a buyer. If there's a buyer and there's an interested party, then perhaps we could talk to council, and maybe we would be able to work with somebody, because we know we have a bill or an invoice that could be hanging over us, and if there's interest in buying that so that it wouldn't become a green space. So all that being said, ultimately finding someone to buy it would be a solution so that it wouldn't be green space. That's the background. After hearing all the testimony this evening and knowing that there's no clear consensus, that among the property owners and really among the community, if I were asked to vote, if it were again a split 5-5, I want to let council know that I would vote no for moving forward with the historic designation at this time. And I want to make clear that that does not mean I don't value the amount of time that went into planning this historic district. I just feel that it needs, I would not want to move forward with something that doesn't have any consensus at this time. Even Planning and Zoning did not give any direction or recommendation. They remain neutral on their recommendation. So looking at solutions, I want to be open to council's suggestions this evening. Perhaps a suggestion could be made to city staff that at the next meeting a resolution could come forward that would give staff some direction on how to proceed on historic preservation efforts, to have a positive impact on the preservation plan, to preserve areas in our community and give staff that direction so they know that it is a priority for the city council. And also updating the process for historic designation. Since it is updated, it's been many years, in fact decades, since it was first put in place, and that the city is lacking tools to make it successful, and it makes it a burden on property owners. I think if we knew that ahead of time, I think that's what has brought that out. So I wouldn't want to say, well, you shouldn't have tried in the first place. I think that's what has come out of this period. So the effort hasn't certainly not been lost. And in the end, the question that Jenny asked at the podium, Mrs. Smith, can the city change the boundaries to include that? And I think that's something council would want to know as well. So I would pose the question to staff if we can change the boundaries, and also like to open it up and hear from council. So Councilman Hensley.
Thank you. I have a question actually of Reverend Gould, if that's all right, or of anyone from Quinn Chapel. It's specific to the issue that you just mentioned. I'll just pose the question. If anyone knows, they can answer. Does Quinn Chapel and the parking lots behind it? I'm looking at the aerial shot. Is that all one single parcel? So they were not unified into a single parcel after you purchased? Does the building itself sit on one single parcel?
There were four on the front. There were four homes there on the front side of Lafayette, and there were homes on the middle side, and then there were so part of the parking lot was vacant land. But like I said, we ended up purchasing 8 different parcels of land. We tried to purchase 9, and said no, but that was on the other side of the parking lot. We didn't really care about that. One of which the city owned and the city actually did.
Thank you. And just to make sure one more time, even through all the development process, and the building currently sits across 4 different parcels?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, yeah, the building specifically sits across 4, actually technically the building probably sits across 5, because there was There was a building there on the corner of Miller and Lafayette as well. Probably 701. So the building actually sits across 5 pieces of property.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much.
Councilman Fitzwater?
Well, I guess if we could get a response from council on your question in regard to can they amend the application or does it start over? And then Mr. Melman responded when I raised the question in regard to could they delay it, could the commission delay it that night? And the answer was no. Do they have the ability, or do we have the ability to ask them to amend it after the fact?
And especially since that request is coming from the applicant. So what would be that answer, Mr. Molman?
Which one shall I address first?
But either one.
Okay. Procedurally, the rules that govern these types of applications in front of the Historic Preservation Commission appear to also govern the City Council. And so I would say the same thing, that the applicant has a right to a continuance, but the City Council does not have the authority to grant a continuance on its own motion. And I'm trying to keep up here as we go along. So if I've said something different to you previously, I apologize. However, in our charter, the charter includes provisions that bills may be placed on the informal calendar. Charter authority trumps city code, and so the city council, the bill sponsor's ability to place something on the informal calendar is unfettered, even in light of this rule contained in the code. So the bill sponsor can still place it on the informal calendar. As far as amending the district, I have previously, and I continue to take a position that once the application is received by the city, that the application can't be amended, particularly by the city council.
You're saying cannot
be amended.
Okay, thank you.
The city council, the city code sets this up to be a property owner driven application initiated by property owners, and does not give the city council or the city authority to start this process. And so therefore the city council corollarily should not be able to have the ability to amend the application itself. And so that's why I take this position. I will say this is the procedures are really poorly set forth in the local historic district ordinance. It's really a disservice to the applicants and to the city under the rules that we're working on. And so this is not a direct answer out of the city code, but it's an interpretation that I have to make based on what I believe the city code is trying to do.
So what does city code directly say?
City code says 75% of the property owners in a proposed district have to sign on to a petition to establish a historic district.
Is there any wording there about amending?
There is no wording about amending.
So if there's not, then what prohibits it?
So once again, this is a hole in the code, and so I'm forced to make an interpretation. My interpretation is that when someone signs a petition that is circulated by a petitioner, they are approving what is contained within that petition at the time that they signed it. And so if a property is added, that is a property that was not in front of a applicant as part of the proposed district when they sign the application, and you cannot make an assumption that the person would have signed that application with if that property was included. Now, it could be reasonable to infer that, but legally you can't make that inference.
Well,
that makes an assumption on a property owner signatory that they would have signed it had it included that additional property.
Okay, and I know we have two hands. I saw Prather before and then Hensley, so why don't we do that?
So if we amended to add them pending their approval, for the application, their percentage, would that work?
Well, it addresses one part of the problem. It doesn't address the second part of the problem. The other 22 property owners who signed the petition in a particular shape, and that's what I was trying to get at. You cannot make the assumption that those property owners would have signed that petition had the shape been different.
And if they did sign a petition to change it?
Then we would be,
So basically what you're saying is if we did something like that, approved it pending both Quinn Chapel's approval and the other owners signing the petition to amend, it would be okay?
There's no authority in the code for that, but it passes the test. It passes the kind of fundamental fairness test. So, yeah, I think the city council could do that.
Councilman Hensley and then Fitzwater.
Thank you. The signing of the petition, does that go beyond simply agreeing to have your discrete parcel included in the district? Or does it also grant some power over the final shape of the district? I mean, does my signing that also give me permission to attempt to exclude other people from being within the district who would like to be? Don't my property rights stop at the boundaries of my property?
Correct. The idea is that this is a collective application, and you can only judge the application on the application that was in front of the voter or the signer at the time he signed it. That's kind of the central idea, and if that could be used to exclude other people, I guess that's a way you can frame it. But the way I'm forcing myself to look at it is that you're asking a property owner to answer a question. Do you want to be part of this historic district that looks like this? And when they sign it, they say yes. And that question did not include, can we add some additional property as well?
Isn't the central question, I'm sorry to jump in, isn't the central question though for each property owner whether they consent to having their property encumbered by the rules that go along with being a historic district?
I think it's a central question. I don't know if it's the only question.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Fitzwater.
My question relates to Councilman Prather's. If we cannot infer that a property owner added, we'd have to go back and ask everyone's opinion. Can we also not infer that the Historic Preservation Commission would approve that application being changed? Since it was a 4-2 vote, I mean, it's going to look much different to the two that voted against it and maybe to one other person.
That's a great question. Ultimately, the city council is the ultimate decision maker, and the historic preservation is essentially a recommending body, and so I think ultimately the city council's decision on this would be the final decision, that you wouldn't have to refer it back to the HPC to take action. I can tell you point blank, this is going on trying to interpret what is in a very sparse code and could leave us open to exposure for challenge on either side. There's no real clear direction on what the right answer is.
Councilman Hussey.
I want to pick up where Councilman Hensley left off, though, just for clarity's sake. I'm looking at the application, and I'm looking at the form that each individual property owner signs. And that form talks about designation requires 75%. It talks about that it would enact building design standards contained within the code here. But I guess I'm curious, are the property owners at any point in time shown a map to say these are the 28 properties? Are they told, like, what is the boundaries? Are they simply asked, we would like you to be included, would you sign off on this? Because I would argue that if they're just asked if they want to be included in a historic district, then that person's not signing based off of anything in front of them that dictates they're one of 28 properties. Because the process, it seems to be the process could be fluid and would be designed in case there's a 29th that comes along. In fact, I do believe we started with 27 and then came to the conclusion there actually was a 28th, and I think the applicant simply went and got one extra signature to hit that threshold. They didn't go out and get everybody else to sign once more to say, well, we were wrong, there was 28.
I believe that was pre-application, or at least pre-final submittal.
So
I don't know the process, and it is a theory that makes sense. I recognize that. I don't think that is the correct answer, that if they weren't shown a map, that they should have been. I think that is part of the question of not only do you want to be a part of a zone, but here's what the zone is.
Yeah.
Mr. Cole?
I'm sorry, my follow-up real quick would just be, if after a historic district is created and you head down the path years down the road, what's the process then to add additional properties to that district if there is said process?
You'd have to infer a process. A static district doesn't make any sense under state zoning law, and this is land use law. What I would suggest is that the code needs to get amended and added, because it's a giant hole in the code.
So a path here could be the approval of the district as it stands before us, with the recognition, or we pass a motion, resolution, whatever it takes to say, if the desire of the council is to add the Quinn Chapel property. I looked it up on the GIS map based off of Councilman Hensley's questions, and it looks like on the GIS map that it's listed as one parcel. Now, maybe it was broken up more before, but it shows as one now. That we could change our code or create that process immediately. And now it's not an immediate answer tonight, but it could give us the chance to add them by a process we determine in the future here to reach some sort of consensus and resolution this evening. Would that be something you think is plausible, or are we playing with fire?
No, I think that'd be fine. I think that'd be well within the city council's ability to control.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Cole?
I was just going to say, the public hearing, though, does specify the number of lots and has the actual district identified. All the public notices for the various public hearings and announcements.
That's correct.
Councilman Graham, did you have your hand up?
I guess my question is for Ms. Smith. Going back to the original application, did the application have a drawing of a map, or how was that application set up?
Councilman Graham, I should probably have Mrs. Smith come to the speaker, and I probably should have done that with Mrs. Gould earlier too, because could you come to the mic?
So we're talking about the original application and how it was sent out to the property owners. How was that sent out? Was it sent out as a drawing of a map, or was it just saying that these properties to this street? How was the application set up?
Prior to beginning the process, we had a neighborhood meeting, and we had maps, and we showed the residents the maps. And when we developed all the parts of the application and began collecting signatures, we emailed to those applicants that we had emailed addresses for, which were most of the residents, or most of the property owners, the map that was emailed. And when we went to get signatures personally, because every one of those had to be notarized, and most of them are individual signature pages, we gave them a copy of the design guidelines. We did not show them a copy of the map, but I think they were all aware of the boundaries, but not I don't think anybody asked specifics, they had seen the maps, but I didn't show them a copy of them every time they got a signature.
Mr. Kroll?
I was just going to say, I'm looking at the application in page 70. I just lost it. Page 70 looks like it has a school district historic map that outlines in blue what appear to be what we've been talking about. So unless I'm not understanding that correctly, it looks like there was a map area designated.
Yes, there was, but I think the bigger question is what you're looking at, that application was submitted after we had collected all the signatures. So I had to have that in,
Okay.
you know, when they signed the application. And they didn't always have I did not put a physical map in front of them. It was kind of understood what the boundaries were. But the bigger thing was the design guidelines that were spelled out, because that's the bigger question for the property owners.
So you're saying, Mr. Molman, that a yes vote would, oh, and I apologize, is anything else for Kathy? Or Jenny, oh my gosh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, Mr. Hensley, Councilman Hensley.
Good evening. Thank you. This is to follow up on something I think you said during your closing rebuttal a little while ago, that if we could find a way to get Quinn Chapel's property into this, that you would not object to that.
Not at all.
Just to follow up on that, if we had to delay briefly for a number of weeks to figure out the correct language to make that happen and to get it done, would that be a problem for you?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. So if, Councilman Graham?
So would that delay be on the informal calendar, or how would that be delayed?
I suppose so, yeah.
For the informal calendar? Okay.
Councilman Fitzwater. Sorry.
Got a follow-up. I'm not picking on our council, but with the comments you made in regard to the changing the size of this, and with the city being a landowner in that district, well, one, I'm trying to get an update on where 408 stands right now, so that's kind of the first part of the question. Second part, if we become the disgruntled landowner because of some significant negative consequence to the city, does that pose any problems for us until we get these kind of things ironed out? So I guess first part is, what's the current status? I mean, I know we got turned down on the demolition. You know, what's the current status, and what's the impact if we become the disgruntled landowner at some point, if things are changed from what we got back?
I have to refer to Mr. Sanders on this current status of 408. I guess I'm sorry if I'm being dense, but I disgruntled by whom?
Well, if we go ahead and approve an expanded district that, as you indicated, I mean, it could come back from the commission and we disagree with them and change the size of it and say, you know, thanks for your work. I'm guessing if they were to come back with a 2 for, 4 against, we wouldn't even be in this discussion, so we probably wouldn't have overruled them. But if we go ahead and it sets up and then someone on council raises the issue later because there's a significant consequence on that property, do we have legal ground to stand on by changing it mid-process without kind of doing the due diligence that has been suggested?
It would certainly cause an opportunity for the appearance of risk, and just to kind of expand on your question, if I may, you may ask yourself, why is the city attorney being so timid here? And I recognize that I am, but in the area of land use law, particularly as it relates to procedures, if you get the procedures wrong, more often than not, the courts will invalidate your actions. That is the penalty for getting these types of things wrong in many, many cases. And so that is where a conservative approach is I'm forced to adopt, is because if you get it wrong, a court can say, no, you did it wrong, and it doesn't count. Start over or go away or whatever, the result may be. And so that particular process would introduce an element of risk.
Well, for the record, I appreciate cautious attorneys, because that's why we ask you the questions, so thank you.
Further questions or deliberation? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sanders.
Yes, 408, a demolition request went excuse me, it's lit, like, definitely. Went before the Historic Preservation Commission. They denied it. We exercised our right of appeal by sending a communication to the city clerk within 30 days. So right now, it's standing where we did protect ourselves in being able to appeal their decision. We thought it was be in the best interest, since we don't know if we have to pay the money back, if there's interest in someone else buying it without restrictions of green space. There's just sort of too many things going on, or possibilities to resolve that. So we thought it was best to sort of play it safe and bet on everything happening. And by exercising the appeal process, that's one avenue that we have to explore down the way. So we're just sitting on it right now.
Thank you. And what I said earlier too about if it were a 5-5 that I would vote no, I want to change that and say if it were 5-5 I would vote yes, if we were able to follow through with what Councilman Hussey outlined as far as moving forward with that process of allowing the inclusion of the Quinn Chapel property. And I believe you said that would need to be placed on the informal calendar, so I'm not sure if Councilwoman Ward?
Yes, thank you. I think based upon what we've heard from the applicants and what we heard from Quinn Chapel, I would like, as the sponsor of the bill, to place it on the informal calendar so we can look into how Quinn Chapel can be added to the historic district.
Okay, so there's been, the bill has been placed on the informal calendar by the sponsor, and Councilman Prather?
I just want I have a question regarding who will be responsible for following up with the interested parties.
Well, I guess, does staff feel like they have direction, or is a formal motion necessary to work that out?
Direction would be great.
Okay.
But
So I would make can I make?
Yes,
I would
Councilman
make
Hussey.
a motion to ask or to direct staff to come up with a process to add properties to a historic district after the creation of that district.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Say it again. Well, the motion would be to ask them to come up with a process to add properties to a historic district after the creation of said district.
After proposed, then it's not actually
Well,
created.
no, because I think that the path we have to take is that we actually have to pass the application in front of us as it stands, and then immediately take action to add an additional property, which would be the Quinn Chapel property. I don't think, based on legal counsel and the process, that we actually do a disservice to everybody if we just go around and amend it, because it sounds like if challenged, it's not going to stand up because of all that process. But it seems as though we can create some sort of a process to add additional properties to a district once it's created. Still doesn't agree.
Councilwoman Wiseman?
Can we actually do that at this point, or do we need to recreate all of the ordinances for that to fit in? And do we have enough time to do that while this is on the impromptu calendar?
The big challenge, and Mr. Barron or Mr. Sanders might be able to speak to this a little more, is that as a land use regulation, it would have to go through a P&Z process. So I don't know how that calendars out, but it certainly adds a dimension to amend the text. That would be.
Councilman Hesse.
And I guess I would add that in an ideal world, they line up where they can all happen, but this gets the ball rolling, and it delays the passage of this to make sure that we work in good faith on that process. If it requires more time to get that amendment or that process in place to add additional properties to a district after its creation, at least we would take a few weeks here to figure out what that looks like, and that staff could come back to us at the next council meeting in a public forum or prior to outline what that looks like, so that in this instance the Quinn Chapel group, congregation, would have an understanding of what that's going to take and be clear about that process before we took action tonight necessarily, and then just said, trust us on the rest. I would prefer just to delay a few weeks here, work through some of those details, and see if we can't prove the good faith side on our part as a city council on this effort.
Point of parliamentary order. The motion to, has the motion to put on informal been acted on?
I don't think we need a motion, correct? Can't the sponsor
As a sponsor,
just place it on the informal?
could the sponsor have alternatively said table into an indefinite period of time, which have the effect of not having a clock tick out?
I consulted Robert rules, which are adopted in the city code. Robert's rules indicates that a motion to postpone indefinitely effectively kills the bill.
Follow up, but then you can specify the time for which the bill is recalled.
Yes, you can postpone, and you can postpone to a time certain, which is a similar but
And that time
different
certain
motion.
could be that time to which other actions have occurred?
I think, yeah, I don't think it would have to be necessarily a date certain, but upon the happening of other events.
Very good.
And I believe we had a motion, but we just needed some clarification.
And just a comment, I believe our informal will probably allow us, it's 3 meetings, I believe. Because it's going to be at least 4 weeks, how the days run. Our first meeting's not till the 6th of next month, so that would probably allow us to get to P&Z, I would think. No?
May I please retract my motion?
Actually, there's a motion on the floor, and the maker of the motion wishes to withdraw that.
No,
I will, the second.
I would, my understanding would be that there's no need for a retraction tonight. If in 3 weeks' time at our next meeting, we have clarity about that specific date, and maybe it's October 1st before we're going to get everything done on this additional process. You could pull it off the floor then, and then turn around and make your motion to postpone to that specified date at that point in time. But I think the informal takes care of us for this evening from where I sit.
I'm happy with that.
Okay. So at this time, we have Councilman Hesse's motion. Do we need that repeated?
I have it.
Okay. Mrs. Donaldson will remind us of that motion.
Motion to direct staff to develop a process to add properties after the creation of a historic district.
So we have a motion and second, and Mr. Kroll.
So Ryan, just for clarification then, if I understand it right, we're going to be coming up with a new procedure, an amended procedure for a planning application. So we'll have a procedure that happens after the fact.
That is not the way I understand
Okay.
Mr. Hussey's direction, is that we would dispose of this particular bill, but have in mind a procedure to add already established districts. That's what I understand Mr. Hussey's motion to contemplate.
Yep. My motion, just so I'm clear, it contemplates that the current procedures specify how to create a district. but it seems as though our current procedures might be silent on how you would add a property to said district as time evolved. And so that this direction would say, you know, this could be any district that gets defined somewhere else in the community of 40 properties, and then a few years later, there's an adjacent street that says it makes sense for us to also be a part of this. Here's our historic quality. We don't have a process specifying how those properties would get added. And so that, if we can figure out a path to do that through a process, I guess that's what I'm directing, not to throw everything out and start new.
Councilman Fitzwater?
Just to comment on that, it just seems like an awkward process for something that is so important to our city to be saying, hey, we found a flaw, let's work on it. We move along down the road, next time we find a flaw. I mean, you made the comment a little while ago that we had an antiquated process, and maybe it's time to look at the entire process and not just piecemeal it, because I understood it the same way Mr. Kroll did, that we were hustling this through so we could take care of this application. Now, I understand it can be used for future applications, but just seems like we're piecemealing this thing to make it happen. That concerns me.
Mr. Sanders?
We were going to put this on the consent agenda, but we had some paperwork issues. We are going to put it on the consent agenda for the August meeting. We have been notified, and we've negotiated with the State Historic Preservation Office that we are 99% sure we're going to be getting 2 historic preservation grants. I alluded to this in an email a while back, but we are waiting on DNR to give us the paperwork to put on the consent agenda. One of those projects is to develop a historic preservation plan, which includes looking at our codes and revising our ordinances. It involves a lot of public participation. It is a $50,000 project, of which $25,000 is the grant money. We also have identified sources of funds in this year's budget due to employee cost savings that we would use for this grant. We have to be done with the grant, I believe, at the end of August. So hopefully we would, I'm just offering a solution to all the issues we have with the code. But this historic preservation plan would also help set goals and objectives, working with the Historic Preservation Commission, working with citizens, working with council and everybody like that to develop a historic preservation plan, which also gives us guidance on ordinances and address these types of issues we have here. We applied for this grant, I believe, last year, knowing that we had issues with historic preservation code. So I'd like to throw that out as something to consider too.
I think we could do both.
We'd be duplicating efforts,
Sure.
piecemealing stuff right now and versus later on next year.
I think this is sort of, in a way, a short-term benefit, and then what you're talking is a little more long-term for the future that would require a little more work and public input and grant approval. But this would get us through to solve this situation now, and then we'll certainly look at it and evaluate and probably make even more changes so it'd be more streamlined for the future. So I would suggest we do both. So we have the motion and second. Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Fitzwater?
No.
Graham?
Aye.
Hensley?
Aye.
Hussey?
Aye.
Kimna?
Aye.
Mahalovich? Prather?
Aye.
Schreiber?
Aye.
Ward?
Aye.
Wiseman?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. So I think we before we move on to item 6, we'll take a 5-minute break. Does that sound good? I do want to thank the Boy Scouts who have sat through this.
Got a good lesson.
Yeah, you get 2 badges, or maybe, I don't know, 3, but you will definitely get your citizen badge. If not, call the mayor and I will make sure you do. But thank you all for being here, and a wonderful lesson this evening in city government. And we thank all of you for being here and making your commentary and staying this late. So thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. I know, me too. Me too. I'm gonna, yeah.
Mr. Bialaroo.
Lori, Lori.
Councilman, grab the mayor, please.
Can someone grab the mayor?
Did anyone order pizza? By chance?
Didn't.
Dang it, Steve, you should know better. Did I not, you didn't get the memo? Well, gosh, okay. All right, we will get our meeting started again. And appreciate everybody's patience tonight. Now we are at item 6, appointments by the mayor. Where's my gavel? Call to order. Okay, item 6, appointments by the mayor. We have Cultural Arts Commission. Emily Fretwell, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Emily. Item 7, presentations from staff, consultants, and invited guests. There are none. Item 8, announcements by the mayor. I have an announcement. The MR 340, sponsored by Missouri American Water, an event where they travel 340 miles of the Missouri River, is coming this Tuesday, July 24th on the Missouri River out of Kansas City. So they will reach Jefferson City on Wednesday early morning of July 25th. I know that that's always something we enjoy, welcoming the boaters as they come through. They're not called boaters. What are they?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
where they gonna be at?
At Wilson Serenity Point.
Down by the what?
Oh! Carlos!
Oh!
Carlos!
Down by the river!
Down by the river in Jeff City, Mo. All right, Carlos. That's where they're going to be at. Good one. Wow. All right, Carlos, we'll see you there. All right. So I cannot be there. If anybody can welcome them that morning, that would be great. On Wednesday, I'm going to Florida to see, I'm going to be going to see Rod Stewart in Florida. So I'm busy. If you could be, Carlos is the man. Carlos is going to welcome them down by the river, along with Ken Hussey. And I know that Councilman Mihalovich is very involved in the river, so I'll expect you to be there as well. So that is Wednesday, the 25th in the morning. Whenever we have a time, usually if we get closer, as they get closer, but I think it's the morning, Steve can let us know. And that's all my announcements. Oh, and vote in August, Tuesday, August, 7th, thank you. Vote. All right, any other announcements? Mr. Sanders.
Since I let the cat out of the bag about one possible grant we feel very good about, we have a second historic preservation grant that we applied for. It's to do an architectural study down the West Main area. That'd be a $13,800 grant, and we do have the funds gleaned from our personnel budget to match that for about $9,200. So the cat's somewhere running around, but I just thought I'd announce that too, since they're both kind of going in tandem.
Okay. Well, I'm allergic to cats, but that's fine.
Okay.
We'll get it.
We'll-
All right.
we'll-
So is Carlos. But anyway, thank you. I have one other announcement. There's a budget meeting. Do you want to announce that one? It's the 23rd?
Yes, starting Monday here at, I believe, 5:30
Yes, Monday the 23rd at 5:30, our first budget
in
meeting.
Chambers.
Here, yes. Any other announcements? Item 9, Lincoln University. Carolyn was here for about the first 3 hours. She left. Anything from Lincoln? Any announcements at the moment? Item 10, presentations from the gallery. Nobody's signed up. Item 11, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Item 12, bills introduced, 2018-26.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a grant agreement between the City of Jefferson and the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for assistance with operating expenses for the air traffic control tower at the Jefferson City Memorial Airport for the period of November 1, 2017 through October 31, 2018.
Mr. Morash?
Thank you. This grant is through MoDOT, would cover up to 50% of our costs for the contract tower. That's usually personnel and utilities. Happy to answer any questions.
No questions? All right. Item 27.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri amending the fares charged by the transit system to include a single-day pass.
Mr. Morash?
This grew out of the tryout program we conducted with LU for a universal ride pass, and to complete it, to make it ongoing with Lincoln as well as any other interested parties, we'd need to modify the code. And you have to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Bills pending. We took up item A, so item B, number 22.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri accepting and approving the final subdivision plat of Turtle Creek Subdivision, Section 2, a subdivision of the City of Jefferson, Missouri.
Mr. Sanders? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
It is closely associated with the next bill as well.
Okay. So you're doing both then? You wanna
Yes.
do both. Okay, so
The
we'll
same
read
time.
number 23 as well.
An ordinance amending Section 19-401, Streets and Highways, Schedule J, Parking Prohibited, Subparagraph A of the Code of the City of Jefferson, Missouri pertaining to portions of Ronan Court and Ryder Court located in Turtle Creek Subdivision.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This bill would approve the final subdivision plat for Turtle Creek Section 2. Bill number 22, and then Bill number 23 would approve the parking plan associated with that. Up on the screen is a location map with the property highlighted. So Section 1 of this subdivision was approved back in 2016 and consisted of 39 lots. There's the developed portion right there, so the air photo does not show that being developed out, but there has since been a number of homes built there. In fact, the subdivision is just about built out. So the developer is proceeding with Section 2 and the final phase of the subdivision, and the area highlighted on the screen would consist of 41 lots, and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of this plat at their June 14th meeting on a vote of 8-0. And then the parking plan associated with the plat is shown up on the screen with the sides of the street highlighted in green where parking would be permitted, and so the bill would prohibit parking on the opposite side of those streets. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, we'll do roll call on 22.
Graham,
Aye.
Hensley,
Aye.
Hussey,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Mahalovich,
Aye.
Prather,
Aye.
Schreiber, Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Bill passes. Now we will have roll call on 23.
Hensley, Hussey,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Mahalovich,
Aye.
Prather,
Aye.
Schreiber,
Aye.
Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Bill passes. 24.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Syntec and Associates for heating, air conditioning, and refrigeration maintenance services.
Mr. Morash.
Clerk indicated it's a maintenance contract with Syntec. It was bid out and based on past usage. And as you can see, the award is recommended for Syntec.
Any questions?
I just
Councilman
have
Hussey?
a 20-part question. No, I'm kidding.
Bring it on.
I move to adjourn.
Roll call, please.
Hussey,
Aye.
Kimna,
Aye.
Mahalovich,
Aye.
Prather,
Aye.
Schreiber,
Aye.
Ward,
Aye.
Wiseman,
Aye.
Fitzwater,
Aye.
Graham,
Aye.
Hensley.
Aye.
Bill passes. Nothing on the informal, no resolutions, no presentations, no discussion. Is there discussion? Item 18, any new business? We have item A, Charter Review Advisory Committee Extension. Mr. Molman.
Thank you. Early last week, I distributed to the City Council a staff report which sets forth some of the recommended changes that the Charter Review Advisory Committee is going to forward or has forwarded to the City Council. As part of that staff review, I informed the Council that the Charter Review Advisory Committee has asked for a 60-day extension to continue to look at just Section 6.2 of the Charter relating to parks. I am forwarding that request on to the City Council here. The resolution that established the Charter Review Advisory Committee provides that extensions may be provided by motion.
So do we have a motion for that extension request? Any further discussion? Do we need roll call? Probably. No. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So motion passes for their extension. Item 19, any unfinished business? Item 20, motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye. All right, good night, everybody. Good night.